Ethan, you're back early. Ethan, is it time to go public with our marriage? I told you 3 years ago. If you reveal it, I'm filing for divorce immediately. Need a reminder? But last night, I thought things were different. Stop daydreaming, Clara. Marrying you is the biggest mistake of my life. Dear colleagues, the office chat buzzed. Anonymous leak alert. Our very own Mr. Blackwood has been secretly married to Clara Shaw's for 3 years. Clara stared at her phone, horrified. Nora, why would you find someone to post this in the company chat? It wasn't me, Ella. I swear, I haven't told a soul. If it wasn't you, who else would do something so pointless? Ella scoffed. You really have no shame. Later that day, Emily cornered Ethan. Ethan, I heard you're married to Clara. Is it true? Ethan sighed. No, Emily. It's just office gossip. Rumors spread by Clara herself. Emily clutched her chest, her breath catching. My heart, it hurts so much. I feel like I'm dying. I'm on my way, Emily, just breathe. Ethan's voice was laced with concern. Neil, Ethan's right-hand man, approached Clara, his face grim. Clara, Mr. Blackwood wants you to apologize to Emily. Apologize for what? What have I done wrong? Clara was bewildered. Explain to Emily about the message in the company chat group. And about the secret marriage, Clara. Is it really just a rumor? Neil pressed. Emily was waiting, fragile and pale. Ethan, is what she just said true? Ethan took Emily's hand, his eyes meeting hers. Of course not, Emily. Even if I were to ever get married, it would only be to you. Emily's eyes softened, relief washing over her features. Oh, Ethan. Clara watched, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Later, Ethan found her in her office, his expression hardening. I don't care how you do it, Clara, but you keep our marriage hidden from everyone in this company. Otherwise, you'll regret it. You hear me? Yes, Mr. Blackwood, Clara replied, her voice flat. I'm not. You misunderstood, Ethan started, then stopped, his jaw tightening. Ella, Clara's best friend, rushed to her side. Clara, you married him for 3 years and kept it from me. Dear colleagues, Clara typed into the company chat, her fingers trembling. I need to clarify something. I spread the rumor about me and Mr. Blackwood in the chat group yesterday. I apologize to everyone, and especially to Mr. Blackwood. Whispers erupted in the office. Miss Shaw's always seems so quiet and gentle, but she's actually so shameless. I told you yesterday she doesn't deserve Mr. Blackwood. Another voice chimed in. I knew it was a rumor. Ella pulled Clara aside, her voice laced with concern. Clara, what exactly is going on? You aren't someone who'd make things up. Leah, thank you for trusting me. But let's just forget about this, Clara pleaded. Please just drop it. Forget about it? Clara, Leah exclaimed, disbelief etched on her face. Ethan's voice boomed from the doorway. Clara, you're fired. Effective immediately. Clara looked at him, her eyes devoid of emotion. Mr. Blackwood, after I leave here, we can consider this settled, right? Ethan's face darkened. So, my guess was right. It really was you who sent the message. It wasn't me, Clara insisted, her voice barely a whisper. It was an anonymous message. I can't find out who sent it yet. You admitted it in public just now. Do you think I'm stupid? Ethan's voice rose, anger simmering beneath the surface. Clara, all these years, I've been walking on eggshells around you, fearing to do anything wrong. I didn't force you to be my wife. He pulled out a document from his briefcase. Now is the right time. Just sign this now, and we'll both be free. He slid the divorce papers across the desk. Just sign this now, and we'll both be free. Clara looked at the papers, then back at Ethan. What if I say no? Ethan's eyes narrowed. If you keep staying with me, Emily's heart problem will never get better. You understand? Emily again? Clara scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I see. Just sign it, Clara. Don't make me force you. He leaned closer, his voice a low threat. If we get divorced, your father will surely withdraw his investment. What about Blackwood Air then? Have you thought of that? Are you threatening me? Clara challenged, her voice gaining strength. I'm not threatening you, Clara, Ethan replied, his tone softening slightly. It's just, your father has a big ego. It's none of my business, really. Just sign it. Ethan's mother, Mrs. Blackwood, swept into the room, her eyes bright. Ethan, I heard about the message in your chat group. Why don't we take this chance to give Clara a grand wedding? Ethan stared at his mother, dumbfounded. Mum, don't worry about our matters, he said, his voice strained. Mrs. Blackwood's smile faltered. I don't have much time left, Ethan. I just want to see your wedding before my last day. Is that too much to ask? Her voice cracked with emotion. The Shaw's family is a wealthy one. Clara married you in secret, enduring all this pressure. We can't mistreat Clara. Ethan's face was a mask of conflict. Leah found Clara in the break room, her voice sharp. Are you stupid? If it wasn't you, why did you admit it? Clara looked lost, her eyes distant. Maybe I am stupid. I don't know why I'd admit it. Let Mr. Blackwood investigate it, Leah urged. It's easy for him to figure out who sent the message. No, Clara said softly. I don't want to bother him. You're the heir to the Shaw's family fortune, Clara. You weren't so weak before. Leah's voice was laced with exasperation. Let's change the subject. People change, Clara murmured, staring into her coffee cup. But you've changed so much in the past 3 years, Clara, Leah observed, her voice gentle. What do you want? Come with me, Clara whispered, pulling Leah's arm. No, I have to check on her, Leah protested, pulling back. Ethan burst into the room, his face furious. You're really scheming, Clara. You even involved my mum just to avoid the divorce. What? Don't play dumb, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice trembling with anger. I've signed the agreement. You can divorce me any time. My mum asked me to have a wedding, Clara. You know I can't refuse her, Ethan said, his tone shifting, almost pleading. I really didn't tell her anything, Ethan. I swear, Clara insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. I hate to be controlled the most, yet you keep challenging my bottom line, Clara, Ethan hissed, his anger flaring again. You bastard! Mr. Shaw's roared, bursting into the room, his face contorted with rage. How dare you hurt my daughter, Ethan? Clara? Mr. Shaw's rushed to his daughter's side, his eyes blazing at Ethan. Dad! I've withdrawn the investment in the Blackwood family, Mr. Shaw's announced, his voice cold and resolute. Dad, please don't, Clara pleaded, her voice filled with despair. No room for discussion, Clara, Mr. Shaw said firmly. Once you recover, go divorce him. Ethan's father, Mr. Blackwood Sr., rushed in, his face pale. Mr. Blackwood, they can't divorce. It's too late to regret it. Hurry up and apologize to Clara. Hurry. He grabbed Ethan's arm, pushing him forward. I don't regret it. Ethan retorted, his voice defiant. If your withdrawal can let me divorce Clara, I can live with it. You ungrateful son! Mr. Blackwood Sr. gasped, clutching his chest. Son! Dad! Dad! Ethan cried, his bravado crumbling as his father collapsed. Mom! Ethan's mother rushed in, her face etched with worry. Mrs. Blackwood! Mrs. Blackwood! Mrs. Blackwood lay still on the floor. Promise me, don't divorce Ethan, she whispered weakly, her eyes pleading with Clara. He loves you in his heart. He just doesn't get it yet. Mrs. Blackwood, we won't have a divorce, Clara promised, tears streaming down her face. Please calm down, Mom. Mom! Mom! Ethan cried, kneeling beside his mother, his voice choked with grief. Mrs. Blackwood! Mrs. Blackwood! Mom! Clara's voice was hollow as she spoke to Leah. How's your mom now, Ethan? Ethan's voice cracked with pain. She passed away. He turned to Clara, his eyes filled with accusation. Are you happy now, Clara? Ethan, Clara whispered, reaching out to him. Stop being pretentious, Clara, Ethan snapped, recoiling from her touch. If you hadn't revealed our marriage, my mum wouldn't have died from shock. From now on, I'll cut off all ties with you, Clara. I'll settle the score with you about my mum. How could this be? Mr. Shawes murmured, his voice heavy with grief. Clara, come home with Dad. It's time to let go. Ella, what's wrong? Clara asked, seeing the troubled look on her friend's face. I found out who sent the message, Clara, Ella said softly. She said Emily asked her to do so. Emily, Clara whispered, shock rippling through her. Dad, I can't go back with you yet, Clara said, her voice firming with resolve. A woman approached, her smile tight. Why are you here, Miss Shawes? She extended a hand. Let me introduce myself. I'm the new co-pilot, Emily Carter. Clara stared at Emily, a cold realization dawning. You have a heart condition, Emily? How could the airline accept you? Emily's smile widened, a hint of triumph in her eyes. It's thanks to Ethan's connections, of course. She paused, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm sorry, I forgot. He didn't even want to reveal his marriage to you. Emily's smile turned cruel. You'll never understand what a man can do for the woman he loves. Since he's chosen you, Clara said, her voice dangerously low. Why did you slander me? And for killing his mum? Emily laughed, a brittle, unsettling sound. Oh, that's nonsense, Clara. What did I slander you for? She smirked, pulling out her phone. I have evidence of you buying someone to send the message. Emily screamed, clutching her face. Help! Ethan, help! Blake! Ethan rushed in, his eyes widening at the scene. Emily pointed a trembling finger at Clara. She suddenly came and hit me. Do you want to finish everyone around me, Clara? Ethan's voice was cold, accusing. The one who revealed our marriage was her Ethan, Clara cried, desperation in her voice. I have the evidence. Ethan ignored Clara, his gaze fixed on Emily, concern etched on his face. You want to blame others for my mom's death, Clara? So in your heart, you've already decided that I'm guilty? Yes. Clara's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Only you would do such things for yourself, Ethan. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry, Clara whispered, her voice breaking. I can't keep my promise of not divorcing Ethan. She turned to her father, her eyes resolute. Dad, I've made up my mind. I will hold a press conference to announce my marriage with Ethan to everyone. Mr. Shawes' face softened, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Clara, Mrs. Blackwood just passed away. Besides, you also saw it. He won't agree. Just sit and wait, Dad, Clara said, a steely glint in her eyes. I'll handle the rest. Dad, I've decided to divorce him, Clara reiterated, her voice firm. Mr. Shaw sighed. I know you're frustrated, Clara, but it was Mrs. Blackwood's will. Since you've promised her, don't break your promise. Ethan blocked Clara's path, his face hard. Clara, you really hate me that much? You even want to threaten me by bankrupting Blackwood heir? It's not my intention, Ethan, Clara said, her voice weary. I'll ask my dad to leave your company alone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. 3 years ago, was it also not your intention to force me to marry you? Clara's voice was flat. You've done it, Ethan. Why don't you dare admit it? I thought you agreed to marry me, Clara, Ethan said, his voice softening slightly. After all, we grew up together. Clara's laugh was bitter. If so, why would I keep it secret? This kind of marriage was the biggest disgrace for me. I'm sorry, Clara, Ethan murmured, a flicker of regret in his eyes. If you had told me... Anyway, Clara interrupted, cutting him off. For Blackwood heir, I agreed to reveal our marriage. But you must be prepared for my anger, Ethan. Ethan, let's go and get a divorce, Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. I'll stay away from you from now on. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening. Okay. You think you can get rid of me like that? Clara turned to leave, her back straight. I'm sorry, Ethan, she said softly. From now on, I call the shots. Clara, a familiar voice called out. Nathan? Why is it you? Clara blinked, confused. What? You're disappointed. When I passed out, you weren't the one I saw helping. Nathan chuckled softly. Why else could it be? Clara? You fell by the roadside. You passed out. I passed out? Clara repeated, her head spinning. It seems I was hallucinating. She coughed, a sharp pain shooting through her chest, and blood splattered onto her hand. What happened to you? Why did you cough up so much blood? Nathan asked, his voice filled with concern. I probably worked too hard lately, Clara said, waving away his concern. I've been abroad for 3 years now. I'm back for family business. If you have any difficulties, you can tell me, Clara, Nathan offered, his eyes meeting hers. I'm doing well. Thank you for helping me, Clara said, managing a weak smile. I heard you and Ethan haven't revealed your marriage in these 3 years. I was away. Has he mistreated you? Nathan's voice was laced with a hint of suspicion. No, he's been treating me well, Clara lied, her voice strained. I asked to keep it secret. I wanted to stay low-key. Nathan's expression hardened. Clara, do you think I'm a fool? He stood up, his eyes fixed on hers. I'll thank you properly someday, Nathan, Clara said, trying to deflect his gaze. But I have something else to do. I must go now. You're still weak, Clara, Nathan insisted, his voice firm. Let me give you a ride. Don't refuse me, or I won't let you leave. Clara sighed, relenting. I'm going back home, Nathan. Okay. I haven't seen my dad in a while. It's time for me to pay him a visit. Ethan watched from across the street as Nathan helped Clara into his car. You hooked up with your old lover pretty fast, Clara, he muttered, his jaw clenching. Nathan, let's go, Clara said, her voice tired. Ethan stormed towards Nathan's car, his face a mask of fury. Ethan? What are you doing? Clara asked, startled. Ethan glared at Nathan, his voice dripping with venom. After 3 years, you've become much more vicious, Clara. Nathan met Ethan's gaze, his expression calm, almost amused. After 3 years, Ethan, you've become quite a gentleman. He turned to Clara, his voice gentle. I just learned from my wife. I suggest you stay away from this woman, Ethan. Otherwise, her viciousness might get you. Ethan grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her towards him. Ethan, do you have to humiliate me like this? We haven't had a divorce yet. You're being with another man. You're humiliating yourself, Clara. Let's go, Nathan said, ignoring Ethan, opening the car door for Clara. Come home with me, Clara, Ethan pleaded, his voice softening slightly. She's sick, Ethan, Nathan intervened, his voice firm. She can't go with you. Mr. Lowe, it is none of your business yet, Ethan snapped, his anger flaring again. At least wait until we have a divorce. You, Ethan, Nathan's voice was icy. I don't care what it costs. I'm taking Clara away. Just you wait. Ethan watched as Nathan drove away, his fists clenched. Are you that eager to find a man to embarrass me, Clara? He muttered, his voice laced with bitterness. No, Ethan, Clara said, her voice weak. I passed out by the road. He happened to be passing by and took me to the hospital. Ethan's eyes narrowed, suspicion etched on his face. Passed out? Well, tell me then. What serious illness do you have? I don't know, Ethan, Clara said, her voice barely audible. I haven't got the results yet. Ethan scoffed, his anger returning. You did so much to seduce a man, Clara. Miss Shaw's, you must feel very accomplished. Clara turned away, tears welling up in her eyes. I agreed to the divorce, Ethan, but you refused. Ethan's voice hardened. My mum died because of you, Clara. You haven't redeemed yourself. If I divorce you, it would be too easy for you. He grabbed her arm, his grip tightening. Let go of me, Ethan, Clara cried, struggling to free herself. Get off me! Ethan ignored her pleas, his face cold and unforgiving. Crying now, Clara. My revenge has just begun. He turned to his security guard. You too, keep an eye on her. No one opens her door without my permission. Ethan stormed out, leaving Clara trembling and alone. Ethan, where did you hide Clara? Leah demanded, her voice laced with anger. It's between me and my wife, Leah, Ethan retorted, his voice cold. None of your business. You really want to continue this, Ethan? Continue the marriage with the daughter of your father's killer? Leah challenged, her eyes flashing with fury. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock. My father's killer? What do you mean? 3 years ago, Ethan, Leah said, her voice low and deliberate. Blackwood Air was about to go bust. Your father ended his life. Ethan stared at Leah, disbelief warring with dawning horror. I don't believe you. You think you can convince me, Leah? Do you think I'm an idiot? Leah pulled out a small device, pressing play. A voice filled the room, cold and calculating. I have the evidence, Ethan. I think it can convince you. Ethan listened, his face paling as the recording played. Was it you who caused the capital shortage of Blackwood Air? His father's voice, laced with despair. It's me, a chilling voice replied. Kane, I'm sorry. Ethan staggered back, his hand flying to his head, pain lancing through him. What do you want, Kane? Divorce Clara, Ethan, Kane's voice said, cold and demanding. And I'll give you the full recording. You want me to divorce Clara with a piece of suspicious recording? Ethan scoffed, trying to regain his composure. I'm not that easy to fool. He doubled over, clutching his head. Why does my head hurt so much? Later, at home, Ethan found Clara sitting in the living room, staring blankly ahead. Ethan, Clara murmured, her voice barely audible. I wonder what's so good about you to make Nathan care so much. Ethan's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in his gaze. What did you do to him, Clara? You worry about him that much, Ethan? Clara asked, a hint of irony in her voice. It's rare to see you so devoted to someone. So you've never seen my devotion to you all this time, Clara? Ethan retorted, his voice laced with bitterness. He turned away, heading towards the stairs. Go take a shower, Clara. Clara watched him go, her heart aching with a mix of pain and confusion. Ethan paused at the top of the stairs, turning back to face her. What do you want again, Clara? He asked, his voice weary. Stupid question, Ethan, Clara replied, her voice soft. Do you think I came home so early just to care about you? Ethan's expression softened, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Please, Clara, he said, his voice low. I've been having a headache all day long. Can I go see a doctor first? Ethan's face hardened again, his eyes turning cold. Even if you really have a headache, Clara, you deserve it. We call this karma. He turned and disappeared into his room. The next day, Clara found a formal invitation on her desk. In 3 days, I'll hold a press conference to reveal you and Clara's marriage. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind. All big media are invited. Try to be at your best. Don't let me down again, Clara. Later that day, Neil approached Ethan, his expression troubled. Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Shaw's called. Ethan sighed, bracing himself for another onslaught of anger. Let me guess. He's threatening to pull out all investments again? Neil shook his head. No, sir. He asked about Clara. Ethan's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his gaze. What about Clara? He asked, if you're treating her well, sir, Neil said hesitantly. He sounded concerned. Ethan scoffed. Concerned? Chester Shaw's? Don't be ridiculous, Neil. He's probably plotting something. Neil hesitated, then spoke softly. Mr. Blackwood, I think you've gone too far with Clara, sir. I can see that you actually like her. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with anger. Like her? Don't be absurd, Neil. This is a forced marriage. I hate it. Understand? I hate it the most. Neil remained silent, his gaze unwavering. Ethan turned away, his voice softening slightly. But I remember when she first flew an international flight, Neil. I lost sleep because of worry. He paused, a hint of confusion in his voice. I drank all night with you. Neil raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Why would you worry for her, Mr. Blackwood, if you hate her so much? Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening again. Fine, Neil. I'll get back to work. Wait. He stopped Neil as he turned to leave. How's the investigation on the recording going? I haven't found Chester Shaw's involved, sir, Neil reported. I only found your dad's answer call from Nathan's father before he ended his life. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. Nathan's father? Michael Lowe? Yes, sir, Neil confirmed. But I haven't figured out what they talked about. After all, it was 3 years ago. Keep working, Neil, Ethan instructed, his voice urgent. This must be investigated thoroughly. Also, Where's Nathan right now? The hospital, I suppose, sir, Neil replied. After Clara fainted at the press conference, He has what, Neil? Ethan pressed impatiently. He has been taking care of her, sir, Neil finished, his voice low. He's quite good, meaning at caring for people. Ethan's expression darkened, his fists clenching. Is Clara the patient? Your girlfriend? Neil asked, his tone cautious. Oh, yes, Ethan replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Neil's expression turned serious. Based on the report and Miss Shaw's multiple fainting experiences, we consider she may have a brain tumor. Ethan froze, his blood running cold. A brain tumor, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Okay, Neil, Ethan said, his voice regaining its strength, though a tremor remained. I see. Also, Miss Shaw's is pregnant. Ethan's breath hitched, his heart pounding in his chest. Pregnant? Neil nodded gravely. You'd better discuss it with her, sir. She may have to give up the baby to get the tumor treated. Ethan's mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions crashing over him. Find the top brain tumor experts, Neil, he instructed, his voice urgent. Invite them to the city. Now. In the hospital room, Clara stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Nathan was sitting beside her bed, his gaze gentle. Nora, you're awake, he said softly, relief washing over his face. Nathan? Clara murmured, her voice weak. Where am I? You're in the hospital, Clara, Nathan explained, his voice soothing. You fainted again? You've been too busy lately, Clara. You're exhausted. You can have more rest. Clara sat up, pushing aside the blankets. I have enough rest, Nathan. Can I be discharged now? The doctor said not yet, Nathan replied gently, pushing her back down. I want to see my dad, Nathan. After such things happened, he must be busy now. I'll do my best to help you, Clara, Nathan promised, his eyes meeting hers. Stay in here for a few days. No need to rush it. But don't worry, Clara. Listen to me here. Let me help you lay down. Clara leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling her under. Nora, Nathan whispered, his voice close to her ear. I only came here to check if you were breathing, but I didn't expect you to be enjoying quite a life. Ethan's voice, cold and mocking, sliced through the quiet room. Clara's eyes snapped open, fear gripping her heart. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. Ethan, Clara gasped, her voice trembling. Ethan, don't forget it was you who did this to her, Nathan said, his voice calm but firm, stepping between Ethan and Clara. Do you even have a conscience? Ethan's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting to Nathan, his anger intensifying. What if I tell Clara you sold her father's secret out just to get me to divorce her? Ethan challenged, his voice laced with venom. What do you think? How she will think of you? Nathan's expression remained unreadable. I dare you, Ethan, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm taking Clara away now. You'd better not stop me. He took Clara's hand, pulling her gently to her feet. But you can try your luck, Ethan. Let's see if I dare. Clara stood frozen, caught between the two men, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan stepped forward, blocking their path, his eyes fixed on Clara, ignoring Nathan completely. There's no need to put up a fragile look, Clara, Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. If others see this, they might think I really harmed you. Did you not hurt me, Ethan? Clara's voice trembled with anger and pain. You made my name a byword. You made a joke out of me. First, Clara, Ethan retorted, his eyes flashing with cold fury. I'm only doing the same. He pulled out 2 documents, divorce certificates, and thrust them at her. Congratulations, Clara. You did it. There's the last step. Our divorce certificates. Clara stared at the papers, her hands shaking. My head aches. Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Can't you wait till I recover? I can't wait any longer, Clara, Ethan snapped, his voice harsh. With the chain of this marriage on me, I feel uncomfortable every second. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the divorce papers. Fine, Ethan, she said, her voice flat. I'll go with you. Ethan turned and stalked out of the room, Clara following behind him. Nathan watching them go, his expression unreadable. Ethan, can you slow down a bit? Clara pleaded, struggling to keep up with his fast pace. My head is in pain. I can't keep up. Ethan ignored her, his pace unwavering. Haven't you learned your lessons, Clara? He sneered, his voice laced with contempt. We haven't had a divorce, but you're already flirting with Nathan Lowe now. Ethan, Clara gasped, her voice laced with disbelief. Now, Ethan, you'd get mad every time you see me being with Nathan Lowe. Are you being jealous, Ethan? Ethan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. Jealous, Clara? You're not worth it. All the media are on your back now, Clara, Ethan continued, his voice rising in anger. Stop disgracing me, Clara. Right, Clara replied, her voice barely a whisper. No matter what I do, I'm just disgracing you. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. What about you and Emily, Ethan? Aren't you guys disgracing me? Her voice cracked with emotion. Was it wrong that I loved you? Ethan, was it wrong that I brought all my family's resources to your company? I could have stayed in my family to be a wealthy heir and inherit the business after my dad retired. But I gave up everything to be a co-pilot beside you. Her voice broke completely, sobs racking her body. What have I done wrong, Ethan? Ethan's face remained impassive, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Shut your face, Clara, he snapped, his voice harsh. Those were all your own doing. I never asked you to do so. Yes, Clara whispered, her voice choked with tears. These were all my own doing. So, I've been wrong since the moment I fell in love with you, Ethan. So wrong. Clara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her body racked with sobs. Ethan turned back, his expression softening slightly as he saw her distress. Clara? He called out, his voice less harsh. Clara didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the ground. Ethan walked towards her, his hand reaching out hesitantly. Clara, why are you here? Mr. Shaw's voice boomed, cutting through the tense silence. Clara turned, her eyes widening as she saw her father standing behind Ethan, his face a mask of fury. Dad! Clara cried, relief flooding through her. Mr. Shaw's rushed to her side, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. Go and get the car, Ethan, Mr. Shaw's ordered, his voice cold and commanding. Ethan hesitated, his eyes flickering between Clara and her father. Get the car for what? He asked, confusion etched on his face. Miss Shaw's, what's wrong with her? Mr. Shaw's demanded, his voice laced with anger. Go, Ethan! Mr. Shaw's roared, his patience snapping. Ethan flinched, turning and hurrying away to get the car. Mr. Shaw's turned his attention to Clara, his voice softening with concern. "Get up, Clara. Go home with me." "Home?" Clara repeated, her voice hollow. "Do I still have a home?" She looked back at Ethan's house, a cold emptiness settling in her heart. "Are you taking me back so you can keep bullying me, Ethan?" she whispered, her voice filled with despair. Ethan returned, the car pulling up beside them. "Are you playing pitiful again to win my sympathy, Clara?" he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "Ethan, I've called Hank, as you told me," Neil said, approaching them, his voice low. "It's just... Are you sure you want her to stay here?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering towards Clara, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Let's see if she is really uncomfortable, Neil," he said, his voice softer now. "Or just pretending." Clara swayed slightly, her vision blurring. Ethan's hand shot out, steadying her, his fingers brushing against her arm. Later that evening, Ethan's phone rang. "Ethan, my dad's urging me again." Emily's voice whined from the other end of the line. "When will you get your divorce certificate?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, even if I divorce her, I can't marry you within 3 years." "Why, Ethan?" Emily's voice rose in frustration. "You already announced your divorce to the press." "My mum just passed away, Emily," Ethan said, his voice weary. "I need time to come out of it." "Emily, if you can't wait," Ethan continued, his voice hardening slightly, "you can choose another man." "When we were in love, Ethan," Emily's voice softened, laced with a hint of manipulation. "Your family was facing bankruptcy. You said you didn't want to drag me down, so I could only go abroad." Her voice turned accusatory. "You just don't want to marry me, Ethan." "If you really think so, Emily," Ethan said, his voice flat, "I can't change your mind." He hung up, cutting off her reply. Neil entered the room, his expression grave. "Ethan, it's Emily Carter." Ethan sighed, bracing himself for another round of drama. "What's happened again, Neil?" "Ignore her, Neil," Ethan instructed, his voice dismissive. "Check if Clara is really sick or not." Neil hesitated. "Just go to the hospital, Neil?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "No matter how good I am, Neil," Ethan snapped, impatience lacing his voice. "I'll need the help of equipment." "Cut the crap, Neil. You knew the basic skills of traditional medicine. Even if Clara is sick, it won't be anything serious. Just check her out. Her face looks like she's not healthy." Neil nodded and left, heading towards Clara's room. He returned shortly, his expression grave. "Ethan indeed," Neil confirmed, his voice low. "Why do you touch her, Neil?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Are you kidding, Ethan?" Neil retorted, rolling his eyes. "I'm checking her pulse. Can I touch her or not?" Ethan remained silent, his jaw tightening, his eyes fixed on Neil. Neil sighed. "How long do you need to practice more, Ethan?" he asked, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "If you're unskilled, just let go." Ethan turned away, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Neil spoke again, his voice serious. "What's wrong, Ethan? I have good news and bad news. Which comes first?" Ethan sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Just tell me, Neil," he snapped, "or get out." "The bad news is," Neil began, his voice low and grave, "Clara does have a severe headache. As for the details, she needs to be checked in the hospital. She's really sick, Ethan. If you don't trust me, why did you ask me to come?" Neil's voice was laced with exasperation. Ethan remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, his mind racing. Neil continued, his voice softening slightly. I just don't trust her. And the good news, Neil said, his voice shifting. Theoretically, it should be good news. But considering your situation, it's actually bad news. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes widening in alarm. Don't keep me in suspense, Neil. Just tell me. I just checked her pulse. Ethan? Neil said, his voice hesitant. And I noticed a pattern which indicates she is pregnant. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. Pregnant? He repeated, his voice barely a whisper, shock rippling through him. That's impossible, Ethan muttered, his voice strained. Are you doubting me, Ethan? Neil challenged, his voice laced with irritation. Or are you doubting yourself? Ethan remained silent, his mind reeling, disbelief warring with a flicker of hope. Give her some medicine to end it, Neil, Ethan said finally, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. You don't even want your own child, Ethan? Neil asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Who knows if that's my child or not? Ethan scoffed, his voice hardening again. Nathan Lowe has been with her in the hospital for so long. I don't believe nothing happened between them. But what if it's really your child, Ethan? Neil pressed, his voice softer now. Ethan paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He looked away, his jaw tightening. Am I really pregnant? Clara's voice, soft and hesitant, broke the tense silence. Clara's father burst into the room, his face etched with worry. Clara, did that bastard Ethan take you with him? Clara nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. Yes, Dad, to get our divorce certificates. Oh, it's a good thing, Clara, Mr. Shaw said, relief washing over his face. Later on, I'll withdraw all my resources. He'll go bankrupt sooner or later. Clara looked up at her father, her eyes filled with sadness. Dad, forget it. The other people in Blackwood Air are innocent. Mr. Shaw's face hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. I don't care, Clara. I'll avenge all your grievances, Clara. Clara sighed, a hand resting protectively on her stomach. Dad, I'm pregnant. Mr. Shaw's froze, his eyes widening in shock. Pregnant? He repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Clara nodded again, tears welling up in her eyes. You want to keep the child, Clara? Mr. Shaw's asked, his voice softening, a hint of tenderness entering his tone. Clara looked at her father, her eyes pleading. The baby is of our blood, Dad. We're a big family. We can take in a child, right? Mr. Shaw's face softened completely, a gentle smile gracing his lips. I see, Clara. But, what if it's really Ethan's child? Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely audible. Nora, I'll give you one last chance, Mr. Shaw said, his voice firm but gentle. I hope you can tell me the truth. Who is the child's father? Ethan stormed into Clara's house, his face a mask of fury. Where did you hide Clara, Shaws? He roared, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. Mr. Shaws met Ethan's gaze, his expression cold and unforgiving. This is also her home, Ethan, he said, his voice calm but firm. It's only normal for her to stay here. Home? Ethan scoffed, his voice laced with contempt. This is just a cage, Shaws. It's a curse. It has trapped my daughter's soul here. Mr. Shaw's face hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. Dad, you're here! Clara's voice called out, relief flooding through her. Clara peered, her face pale but resolute. "Just open your eyes, Ethan," Mr. Shaw said, his voice dripping with venom. "Look how you have tortured my daughter." "If you're only here to accuse me, Shaws," Ethan retorted, his voice cold. "There's no need to. I have a clear conscience about what I did." Mr. Shaw's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Clear conscience, Ethan? Do you also have a clear conscience about your own child?" Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Dad," Clara said softly, her voice laced with warning. "You promised me not to tell him." Mr. Shaw sighed, relenting slightly. "You must have also told Nathan about your belly, Clara," Mr. Shaw said, turning to his daughter. "Otherwise, why would he care about you so much?" Clara blushed, her eyes downcast. "However," Mr. Shaws continued, turning back to Ethan, his voice hardening again, "I'd suggest Nathan to get a DNA test, Ethan. What if I'm the father?" Ethan's face contorted with rage, his fists clenching. "Bastard!" Mr. Shaws roared, his voice shaking with fury. "I was going to spare you this once, Ethan, for the sake of the child. But starting right now, I'll make you regret it for life." "Dad, I'm sorry," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Shaw's face softened, his gaze filled with love and compassion. "I'm not blaming you, Clara. Even without a father, we can still raise a child." Clara's eyes met her father's, gratitude and love shining through her tears. "Thank you, Dad." "You're my only daughter, Clara," Mr. Shaw said, his voice thick with emotion. "For the sake of the child, get yourself together, Clara." Clara nodded, wiping away her tears, a newfound strength settling within her. "Dad, I'll go home and be your assistant," she said, her voice firming with resolve. "When I can manage the company, you can retire in peace." Mr. Shaw smiled, pride radiating from his eyes. "That's more like it, Clara. Come on, I'll cook for you today." Later that day, Clara found Nathan waiting for her outside her father's office. "What are you thinking about, Clara?" Nathan asked gently, his eyes meeting hers. "About work, Nathan," Clara replied, managing a small smile. "How did you know I'm here?" Clara asked, tilting her head. Nathan smiled, a hint of warmth in his eyes. "I'm just passing by, Clara. I heard you're going to inherit your family business. Congratulations, Clara." Clara's smile widened, a genuine happiness blossoming within her. "I'll just help my father handle some easy work, Nathan," she said, her voice lighter now. "Everything has changed since I left 3 years ago. I'll learn everything from scratch." Nathan's gaze lingered on her, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "You look so much better, Clara. A new environment is good." Clara nodded, her eyes sparkling with renewed energy. "I used to feel smothered under my father's strict control," she confessed, her voice softer. "Now, I finally feel that I'm so happy staying by his side." Nathan's eyes darkened slightly, a hint of longing in his voice. "If you chose to marry me that year, Clara, would everything be different?" Clara's smile faltered, a shadow passing over her face. "There's no if, Nathan," she said softly. "Also, we'll be better off being friends, Nathan." Nathan's expression hardened, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Clara, can you give me a chance?" Clara shook her head gently, her voice firm but kind. "I've decided to close the door on relationships, Nathan." "I can wait for you to be ready, Clara," Nathan insisted, his voice unwavering. Clara sighed, her eyes meeting his, a hint of sadness in her gaze. "Nathan, you'd better not wait." Mr. Shaw's appeared, his face stern. "Nathan Lowe," he greeted, his voice cold. "I told you to give up that thought 3 years ago, Nathan. It's even more impossible for you now. You can't marry my daughter." Nathan's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with anger. "Mr. Shaw's, why did you let Clara marry Ethan Blackwood?" he challenged, his voice laced with bitterness. "What makes that better than me?" Mr. Shaw's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with authority. "Because I'm Chester Shaw's, Nathan. You can't, as long as I say so." "Dad, I don't understand why you disapprove of Nathan so much," Clara said, her voice laced with frustration. "I've met so many people, Dad," Clara continued, "and Nathan he's been nice to me." Mr. Shaw sighed, his expression softening slightly. "He is a complete hypocrite, Clara. He's been nice to you. You'll figure it out later, Clara. Anyway, stay away from him." Ethan arrived at Kane's office, his face grim. "What are you doing here, Kane?" Ethan demanded, his voice cold. "You're not welcome here." Kane smirked, leaning back in his chair, his eyes glinting with amusement. "There's no grudge between us, Ethan." Ethan scoffed, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "Do you feel jealous because Clara is close to me, Kane?" Kane's smile widened, a hint of malice in his eyes. "Don't bring up that woman, Ethan. Get out. You're as annoying to me as she is." Ethan's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. "I can help you cover the funds Chester Shaw's withdrew," Kane offered, his voice shifting, becoming more businesslike. "And the investment he cut off." Ethan's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his gaze. "What's your purpose, Kane?" Kane's smile widened, a hint of triumph in his eyes. "Make me divorce Clara, Ethan," he challenged, his voice laced with sarcasm. "No, Ethan," Kane corrected, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Let's work together to obliterate Shaw's group, Ethan." Ethan stared at Kane, disbelief warring with a flicker of intrigue. "Give me a reason, Kane," Ethan demanded, his voice firm. "If not, how can I trust you?" Kane leaned forward, his eyes meeting Ethan's, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You don't want to ruin him, Ethan. Chester Shaw's? He's been the daddy of Manhattan for 30 years, Ethan, cutting off all our options." Ethan remained silent, his mind racing, weighing the risks and rewards of Kane's proposition. "I'm not as ambitious as you are, Kane," Ethan said finally, his voice low. "Please leave." Kane scoffed, standing up, his eyes flashing with contempt. "Take your time, Ethan," he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're a coward, Ethan. He forced you to marry Clara, but you only dare to take revenge on Clara." He paused at the door, turning back to face Ethan, his voice low and menacing. "Give me the recording before my father's tragedy, Ethan. Only then will I consider whether to target Chester Shaw's or not." Kane turned and strode out of the office, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Ethan's phone buzzed, a message from Leah. "Hank, leverage every connection of ours to find evidence of Chester Shaw's transferring assets overseas," Ethan instructed, his voice urgent. "It's a tall order, Ethan," Leah replied, her voice hesitant. "Nonsense, Leah," Ethan snapped, his impatience flaring. "Why did I turn to you if it's not?" Later that day, Clara visited her doctor, her heart heavy with a mix of hope and fear. "Mr. Shaw's, your baby is very healthy," the doctor announced, smiling warmly. come here for regular checkups. Clara smiled back, relief washing over her. Thank you, doctor. You are a bit malnourished, Miss Shaw's, the doctor added, his expression turning slightly concerned. Try to have your husband come here with you. Clara's smile faltered, a shadow passing over her face. Okay, doctor. Later, alone in her apartment, Clara spoke softly to her unborn child. Baby, you don't have a father, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Will you blame me? Ethan arrived at Clara's apartment, divorce papers in hand. I brought the files needed, Clara, he said, his voice flat. We can get a divorce now. Clara looked up at him, her eyes meeting his, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. I'm not here to divorce you, Ethan. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in surprise. What do you want to do then, Clara? He asked, confusion etched on his face. Clara took a deep breath, her voice firm and resolute. I want to talk with you about the baby, Ethan. Ethan's expression hardened, his eyes turning cold. There's nothing to talk about, Clara, he snapped, his voice dismissive. Like you said, it's not your baby. Clara's eyes flashed with anger. Now I'm sure it's my baby, Ethan, she retorted, her voice laced with sarcasm. No matter whether it is or not, Ethan, she continued, her voice softening slightly. That doesn't change anything. Ethan remained silent, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. Clara sighed, picking up the divorce papers from the table. Call me when you decide to divorce, Ethan, she said, her voice weary. You don't want the kid to be born without a daddy, right? Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening again. Don't tell me this marriage will continue, Clara, he said, his voice laced with warning. Clara met his gaze, her eyes resolute. I'll agree to this for the child's sake, Ethan, she said, her voice firm. I don't want the baby to know such a base person as his father. Ethan paced in his office, his mind racing, conflicted emotions warring within him. He picked up the phone, dialing Neil's number. Neil, get the most expensive roses delivered to Shaw's Group every day, Ethan instructed, his voice cold, but a hint of something else, something softer, beneath the surface. To Clara, leave a note that says, Wifey, I'm sorry. I wonder if she'll fall for the bait. Clara walked into her office, Leah waiting for her, a knowing smile playing on her lips. Clara, people at the office say that Ethan has been sending you flowers these days, Leah teased, her eyes twinkling. Clara shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. I had them thrown away, Leah. Leah raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. What do you think about this, Clara? You are cracking down on Blackwood Air. Maybe he has fear of bankruptcy. Clara scoffed, a hint of amusement in her voice. He never learns a lesson, Leah, even when his bones are crushed. Compromise is just a ruse, Leah, Clara continued, her voice hardening slightly. He's sending flowers every day for a hidden agenda. I don't know, Clara, Leah said, her voice thoughtful. He's very calculating, Clara. Ethan entered his house, the air thick with dust, the furniture shrouded in sheets. Why does the house smell so bad and look so messy? He muttered, his voice laced with irritation. Where is the servant? His housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, appeared, her face apologetic. I don't have one, Mr. Blackwood. Ethan stared at her, bewildered. What do you mean, Mrs. Davis? Clara used to clean the house, Mr. Blackwood. Mrs. Davis explained softly. Ethan stared around the dusty, silent house, a wave of guilt washing over him. "Oh gosh," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Why do you want to divorce such a good woman, Ethan?" Mrs. Davis asked. Her voice filled with concern. Ethan turned away, unable to meet her gaze, shame burning in his chest. "No more, Mrs. Davis," he said, his voice strained. Ethan found Neil in his office, pacing restlessly. "Neil, how's the investigation going?" "Nothing's been found, Ethan," Neil reported, his voice grim. "All right," Ethan sighed, resignation in his voice. "I expected this." Neil looked at Ethan, his expression troubled. "Are you nuts, Ethan?" "Why did you let me investigate?" "I've made other preparations, Ethan. I can still bring Chester Shores down." Ethan shook his head, his eyes weary. "You still can't get over what the Shores did to you?" "Ethan?" Neil asked, his voice laced with concern. "The Shores are suspected of having made us bankrupt and forced my father to end his life." Neil nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I understand how you feel, Ethan," Neil said softly. "But Chester Shores became the richest guy in Manhattan 10 years ago. What was his motive for doing that? And there are contradictions in these matters." Ethan frowned, confusion clouding his gaze. "What contradictions, Neil?" "If he wanted to target your family, Ethan," Neil explained, "why did he let his daughter marry you?" "Clara wanted to marry me, Neil," Ethan scoffed, disbelief in his voice. "They were worried I might refuse, so they made us bankrupt and forced me into the marriage. In that way, I couldn't refuse." Neil shook his head slowly, his eyes meeting Ethan's. "Wait, Ethan, that's not true. My mother said—" "Your mother requested the marriage, Neil," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. "Chester Shore was strongly opposed to it." Neil's eyes widened in shock, disbelief warring with dawning realization. "Then, my mother requested the marriage?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Impossible, Ethan," Ethan insisted, his voice hardening again. "It was Clara who forced my family into the marriage." "If you don't believe me, Neil," Ethan continued, his voice low and intense, "I'll have my mother talk to you." Neil remained silent, his mind racing, trying to reconcile the conflicting information. "Even if my mother requested it, Ethan," Neil said finally, his voice hesitant. "She was forced to do that." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with anger. "Mr. Blackwood, I think you've gone too far when dealing with Clara," Neil said softly, his voice laced with concern. "I can see that you actually like her." Ethan turned away, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "I'm tired, Neil," he murmured, his voice weary. "You can leave now." Later, Neil returned, his expression hesitant. "Ethan, I heard that you've been giving Clara roses lately." Ethan scoffed, turning away, his back to Neil. "You can apologize to her formally, Ethan," Neil suggested gently. "For her to come back." Ethan's laugh was harsh and bitter. "I'll do that to delay the divorce, Neil." "When Chester Shores kicks the bucket, Neil," Ethan continued, his voice cold and calculating, "I'll have their family fortune." Neil sighed, shaking his head. "Keep on with your pretext, Ethan," he said, his voice laced with disappointment. "Your life is tiring." "Tires me too, Neil," Ethan retorted, turning back to face him, his eyes flashing with anger. "Good then, Neil," Ethan snapped, his voice harsh. "Succeed to your family business. Don't freeload at my company. Remember what you said, Neil? Ethan continued, his voice low and menacing. When I get home, I'll propose to the Shaws family. It's an arranged marriage anyway. I'll pick a woman I like. Dare you, Ethan? Neil challenged, his voice laced with sarcasm. Are you sure you don't like her, Ethan? Ethan ignored Neil's question, striding out of the office, his mind fixed on Clara. Ethan arrived at Clara's apartment, roses in hand. Clara, let's meet up, he said, his voice softening slightly. Have you accepted my apology and will go home with me? Clara opened the door, her expression cold and distant. I'm here to tell you to stop sending me flowers, Ethan, she said, her voice flat. I've started a new life, Ethan. I don't want to go back to that cage. Even if the kid doesn't have a dad, Ethan, she continued, her voice firming with resolve. I'll give him all my love, so I don't mind. But I do, Clara, Ethan interrupted, his voice softening, a hint of desperation creeping in. Unless he's a bastard, Clara, he has to stay in the Blackwood family. I won't give the child to you, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice laced with anger. No, Ethan. No matter what. Don't ever think about that. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. How long can your father live, Clara? He asked, his voice low and menacing. Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock, fear gripping her heart. As long as I didn't divorce you, Ethan, Ethan continued, his voice cold and calculating. Shaw's group will be mine anyway. Then I will decide the child's future. Ethan, how dare you? Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury. From now on, Clara, Ethan said, his voice hardening again. As long as you stay with me and give birth to the baby, I'll consider letting you go. Clara stared at him, disbelief warring with dawning horror. Clara received a call from her father. Dad, the butler said you're not home. Where are you? I'm at my bestie's place, Clara, Mr. Shaws replied, his voice casual. I'll go home later. Did anything happen, Dad? Clara asked, her voice laced with concern. No, Clara, Mr. Shaws reassured her, his voice gentle. I'm fine. Go home earlier, Clara. Don't make me worry. At your bestie's place, Dad, Clara repeated, a hint of suspicion in her voice. You don't even blush when you lie, Dad. I must go back home tonight, Clara, Mr. Shaws said, his voice firm. If my father doesn't see me, he'll come here. It won't be his first time coming here. Ethan arrived at Clara's apartment, finding her pacing restlessly. So what if he came, Clara? Ethan sneered, his voice laced with contempt. Ethan, torturing me is not enough. Huh? Clara retorted, her voice trembling with anger. You want to target my father? Can you give him some peaceful days, Ethan? Clara pleaded, her voice softening, a hint of desperation creeping in. Ethan hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I can let you go home, Clara, he said finally, his voice less harsh. But I have a condition. Clara's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding her gaze. As long as I'm able to do it, Ethan, Clara said, her voice wary. I can agree. You haven't slept with me in a long time, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat, horror gripping her heart. I'm pregnant, Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan ignored her words, stepping closer, his eyes fixed on her, a predatory glint in his gaze. Are you crazy, Clara? Clara cried, recoiling from his touch. Don't struggle, Clara, Ethan warned, his voice cold and menacing. If the baby is hurt, you can't blame me. I hope you'll be available whenever I call Clara. I won't go find you at your house. Ethan's words hung in the air, chilling Clara to the bone. Ethan, what should I do for you to let me off? Clara pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. I am still interested in your body, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and cruel. Till I get bored of it. Emily stormed into Clara's apartment, her face contorted with rage. Clara, you're so shameless. Emily spat, her voice dripping with venom. Come back to Ethan's house again. Clara met Emily's gaze, her expression cold and defiant. Miss Carter, you must be terribly ill, Clara retorted, her voice laced with sarcasm. This is my home, Emily. I can come here or leave any time I want. Emily's eyes flashed with fury, her hand flying out, slapping Clara across the face. You slapped me again, Emily shrieked, her voice shrill. You think I'm a pushover? Clara's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with anger. This won't be the last time I'll slap you, Emily, Clara warned, her voice low and menacing. Whenever I see you, let's wait and see. Emily scoffed, pulling out her phone. I'll call him over, Clara, she threatened, her voice dripping with malice. He won't let you off. Clara smiled, a cold, chilling smile. Good then, she said, her voice soft but deadly. When the Blackwood family went broke, Emily, you made such a fuss and asked Mrs. Blackwood to compensate you. Emily froze, her eyes widening in shock, her face paling. I want to tell Ethan about this, Emily, Clara continued, her voice relentless. You... How did you know that? Emily stammered, her voice trembling. I also know that you had many boyfriends when you were abroad, Emily, Clara continued, her voice relentless. Don't talk nonsense, Clara, Emily shrieked, her composure crumbling. My friends overseas helped me figure it out, Emily, Clara said, her voice cold and unwavering. Your nasty pictures are in my hands now, Emily. Emily's face contorted with fear, her eyes darting around wildly. So what, Clara? She stammered, her voice barely audible. Ethan won't believe you anyway. If you provoke me again, Emily, Clara warned, her voice low and menacing, I'll expose the pictures to the public. And I have a heart disease, Emily, Clara added, her voice dripping with sarcasm. If you irritate me, Ethan will never let you off. He's already planning not to let me off. Ethan has proposed to me, Clara, Emily boasted, trying to regain her composure. I advise you to divorce him soon. Don't be so thick-skinned, Clara. Ethan arrived home, finding Emily waiting for him, her face pale and distraught. Emily, why don't you get in? Ethan asked, his voice laced with concern. Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. I ran into Clara, Ethan, she stammered, her voice trembling, and chatted with her a bit. Ethan's jaw tightened, suspicion clouding his gaze. What can you talk about with her, Emily? He asked, his voice cold. It's a waste of time. Emily grabbed Ethan's car keys, her hands shaking. Why did you take the car keys, Emily? Ethan asked, his voice hardening, anger simmering beneath the surface. Do you want to send Clara home, Ethan? Emily challenged, her voice laced with accusation. Don't be paranoid, Emily, Ethan retorted, his voice dismissive. You don't have the right to interfere, Emily. Emily clutched her chest, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan, she gasped, her voice weak. The doctor said my heart has been under too much stress. I can't live much longer. Ethan's expression softened, concern washing over his face. I'll arrange for your treatment overseas soon, Emily, he promised, his voice gentle. Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. The doctor said it's incurable, Ethan, she sobbed, her voice breaking. I just want to be your wife, Ethan, and depart in your arms. Ethan's face hardened, his eyes turning cold again. I've explained about the marriage, Emily, he said, his voice flat. Don't make me repeat it. 3 years of mourning. Don't just give me the runaround, Ethan, Emily cried, her voice rising in anger. When your father ended his life, Ethan, you married Clara, only after half a month. Ethan's hand flew out, striking Emily across the face, the sound sharp and echoing in the silent house. Cut your face, Emily! Ethan snarled, his voice laced with fury. Emily stared at him, shock and pain etched on her face. You slapped me, Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely audible, tears streaming down her face. Emily, I can't divorce Clara now, Ethan said, his voice softening slightly, though a coldness remained in his eyes. Emily's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. You're in love with her, Ethan, she hissed, her voice laced with fury. As long as I'm their son-in-law, Ethan, I can inherit their family assets, Ethan said, his voice cold and calculating. So I can never marry you, Emily, right? Emily spat, her voice laced with bitterness. I can give you whatever you want, Emily, Ethan said, his voice softening again. Except for being my legal wife. When my family went bankrupt, Emily, Ethan continued, his voice low and sincere, you gave me all your savings. I'll never forget your kindness, Emily. Emily's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of hope in her gaze. I want you, Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Let's have a baby, Ethan. Ethan's expression hardened, suspicion clouding his gaze. You're just lying to me, Emily, he accused, his voice cold and harsh. You don't want to give me anything, Emily. The company is facing bankruptcy, Ethan, Emily cried, her voice rising in panic. I haven't been formally divorced. There can't be more scandals, Ethan. Scandals! Emily's breath hitched, her chest heaving, her hand clutching at her heart. Your heart attack is acting up, Emily, Ethan observed, his voice cold and detached. Don't care about me, Ethan, Emily shrieked, her voice shrill. None of your business. Don't be stubborn, Emily, Ethan said, his voice softening slightly, a hint of concern creeping in. I'll take you to the hospital. Clara arrived at her father's house, finding him waiting for her on the porch. Dad, why are you waiting for me here? Clara asked, her voice laced with concern. Mr. Shaw smiled, his eyes filled with love and relief. Seeing you earlier reassures me, Clara. Dad, I can take care of myself, Clara protested gently, her voice soft. For 3 years, Clara, Mr. Shaw said, his voice thick with emotion. I've never heard a breath of your worries. I've never shown my care to you and neglected you, Clara. Clara's eyes softened, tears welling up in her eyes. Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking. To me, you're the perfect one. Mr. Shaw smiled again, his eyes twinkling. I really feel that I'm getting old, Clara, he said, his voice gentle. You got to be mature soon, okay, Clara? Nathan approached Clara, his expression warm and inviting. Clara? He greeted, his voice soft. It's rare for you to take the initiative to ask me out. Clara smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. I ask you here because I want to apologize to you, Nathan, she said, her voice sincere. For that thing. Nathan raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. What thing, Clara? What my father yelled at you here, Nathan, Clara explained, her voice hesitant. Nathan chuckled softly, waving away her apology. Did you forget that, Clara? He asked, his voice light. It's too little to be kept in mind. It's normal to get yelled at by seniors. Clara smiled, relief washing over her. I'm glad you think that way, Nathan. Are you busy, Clara? Nathan asked, his voice shifting, becoming more businesslike. I heard that Shaw's group nailed some major projects. They were all led by you. Clara nodded, pride shining in her eyes. Nathan. By the way, Clara, Nathan continued, his voice casual, I also want to ask if there's anything we can work on together. Win-win can't be bad. Clara's smile widened, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. This is the same radiance you had before your marriage, Clara, Nathan observed, his voice filled with admiration. Does your father agree to partner with me, Clara? Nathan asked, his tone shifting back to business. Clara nodded again, her eyes meeting Nathan's, a hint of excitement in her gaze. He doesn't interfere, Nathan, she said, her voice confident. If any mistake is made, just take it as a lesson learned. Also, will you harm me, Clara? Nathan asked, his eyes searching hers. Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. Of course not, Nathan. Recently, I've been engaged in a big project, Nathan, Clara said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Ethan appeared suddenly, his face a mask of fury, his eyes flashing with rage. Go on, Clara, Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with venom. I'm just passing by. Pretend I don't exist. Clara ignored Ethan, turning back to Nathan, her voice unwavering. Ethan, can you keep some distance? Clara asked, her voice cold and dismissive. We're talking business. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Did I interrupt you, Clara? Ethan sneered, his voice laced with sarcasm. Or do you mean, like, you are talking about something shady? Nathan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm, interposing himself between Ethan and Clara. Sorry, Ethan, Nathan said, his voice polite but dismissive. Let's talk another day, Clara. It's okay, Nathan, Clara replied, her voice gentle. Okay, Clara, Nathan said, his voice warm. I'm free at any time. Ethan's face contorted with rage, his eyes flashing with fury. What? You turned furious because I caught you too red-handed, Clara? Ethan roared, his voice shaking with anger. You can frame me, Clara, Ethan continued, his voice low and menacing. But don't involve Nathan in this. He's different from you. Of course he's different, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm not as good an actor as he is. You got completely fooled around? Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, suspicion clouding his gaze. I've met many people, Clara, Ethan said, his voice cold and hard. He's a complete hypocrite. Clara scoffed, rolling her eyes. How could you say that, Ethan? How did? Did he fool me around? Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You want to know, Clara? He asked, his eyes glinting with malice. My car is nearby. We can talk about it in my car. Scram, Ethan, Clara snapped, her voice laced with anger and disgust. "I'm not asking you for this, Clara," Ethan said, his voice softening slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. "Like I said, Clara, whenever I'm in need, you should be cooperative. Don't let me see you and Nathan Lowe alone. Otherwise, this will be your end." Ethan's words hung in the air, chilling Clara to the bone, a wave of fear washing over her. "Ethan, why should I listen to you?" Clara challenged, her voice trembling but defiant. "I kept our marriage a secret for 3 years, Ethan. What did I get?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, his voice hardening again. "You should know the consequences of not listening to me, Clara," he warned, his voice low and menacing. "What do I need to worry about, Ethan?" Clara retorted, her voice gaining strength. "I've experienced the worst scenario." "No, Clara," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold and hard. "You haven't." "What do I need to worry about, Ethan?" Clara repeated, her voice rising in anger, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've experienced the worst scenario." "No, Clara," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold and hard. "You haven't." "Clara! Clara!" "Nora, Dad, you're here!" Clara cried, relief flooding through her as her father appeared, his face etched with worry. "What's on your mind, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice laced with concern. Mr. Shaw's sighed, shaking his head. "Dad, I met a scoundrel at work," Clara confessed, her voice trembling with anger. "He's a free—" "What do you think I should deal with him, Clara?" Mr. Shaw's asked, his voice gentle, encouraging her to confide in him. "Tell me the solution on your mind, Clara." Clara hesitated, her eyes downcast, her voice barely audible. "He has no weaknesses or soft spots to hit, Dad," she whispered, despair creeping into her voice. "Otherwise, I really want to send him to jail." Mr. Shaw's face hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. "I'll figure something out, Clara," he promised, his voice firm and resolute. "Tell me his name, Clara." Clara shook her head, a sad smile gracing her lips. "Forget it, Dad," she said, her voice weary. "I'll handle it myself." "By the way, Dad," Clara continued, changing the subject, "my 50th birthday is coming. Invite Ethan to my birthday party, Dad." Mr. Shaw's froze, his eyes widening in surprise. "Dad, why do we invite him?" Clara asked, her voice laced with confusion. "You haven't got a divorce, Clara," Mr. Shaw's explained, his voice gentle. "He's still my son-in-law. You can invite him first, Clara. If he doesn't want to come, then forget it." Ethan received a call from Clara. "You miss me so soon, Ethan?" he sneered, his voice laced with sarcasm. "My father's birthday's coming, Ethan," Clara said, ignoring his taunt. "Do you want to come?" Ethan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. "Have I been to his birthday party, Clara?" he retorted, his voice dripping with contempt. "I'll only get insulted in front of the upper class." Clara sighed, her voice laced with disappointment. "Since you don't want to come, Ethan," she said, her voice flat. "Fine then. I didn't plan to invite you." She hung up, cutting off his reply. Ethan stared at his phone, his jaw tightening, anger simmering beneath the surface. "This woman is getting bolder," he muttered, his voice laced with fury. "She gave me a cold shoulder and dared to hang up on me." Ethan called Leah, his voice urgent. "Leah, you haven't found Chester Shaw's crime evidence?" "There's no crime evidence at all, Ethan," Leah reported, her voice grim. You You fooled me, Leah, Ethan roared, his voice shaking with anger. I think you're too cowardly to attack Chester Shores, Ethan, Leah retorted, her voice laced with sarcasm. You can't egg me on. Our cooperation is cut off from now on. Leah, don't bother me anymore. Kane appeared in Ethan's office, a smirk playing on his lips. It's me, Ethan, Kane said, his voice low and menacing. Sorry, Ethan. Your wife has an affair with me. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. You knew it long ago, Ethan, Kane continued, his voice dripping with venom. When you resented me, I had no choice but to take action. As I said, Ethan, Kane continued, his voice low and conspiratorial. This recording is related to your background. You even want to smear my mother with this fake recording, Kane? Ethan scoffed, disbelief in his voice. I knew you wouldn't believe it, Ethan, Kane said, his smirk widening. You can ask Chester Shores yourself. His birthday is coming in a few days. You can approach him secretly. Whether to poison him or not is all up to you. Ethan stared at Kane, horror gripping his heart. You want me to murder him, Kane? Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Kane shrugged, his eyes glinting with malice. He hurt your father, Ethan. Do you want me to do it for you? Ethan recoiled, disgust washing over him. You really went to all lengths just to get Clara, Kane? Ethan asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Aren't you worried she'd find out? Kane laughed, a cold chilling sound. You can tell her, Ethan, Kane said, his voice laced with contempt. Even if she hates me, I'm still determined to get her. Ethan's phone rang, Neil's name flashing on the screen. Chester Shores, what's up, Neil? Ethan answered, his voice weary. Mr. Blackwood, the experts have checked Miss Shores' diagnosis report, Neil reported, his voice grave. It can be confirmed that she's got a brain tumor. Ethan's breath hitched, his blood running cold. How long will she live, Neil? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Less than 1 year, Mr. Blackwood, Neil replied, his voice low. Organize an elite medical team to stand by, Neil, Ethan instructed, his voice regaining its strength, though a tremor remained. Mr. Shaw's birthday party was in full swing, the ballroom filled with music and laughter. Mr. Shaw's raised his glass, a smile gracing his lips. Dad, happy birthday, Clara said, presenting him with a gift. You made this? Mr. Shaw's asked, his voice touched. Ethan approached, a gift in hand. Mr. Shaw's, happy birthday, Ethan greeted, his voice polite. Here's a gift for you. Mr. Shaw's smile faltered slightly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Ethan. Thank you, Mr. Shaw's said curtly, accepting the gift. Didn't you say you wouldn't come, Ethan? Mr. Shaw's asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Ethan forced a smile, his eyes meeting Clara's, a plea in his gaze. I'm warming you, Mr. Shaw's, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. It's my father's 50th birthday. Don't try to ruin it. Mr. Shaw's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with anger. If I ruin it, Ethan, Mr. Shaw's challenged, his voice cold and hard. How will you punish me? Ethan's smile widened, a hint of malice in his eyes. You've become so shameless, Clara, Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You were also shameless when you haunted me. You're crazy, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice laced with disgust. There are so many people here. I'm warning you too, Ethan, Clara hissed, her voice low and menacing. Stop being naughty. Otherwise... Ethan cut her off, his voice rising, his anger flaring. I don't care where I am now, Clara. I know, Mr. Blackwood. Mrs. Blackwood. Have you two made up? A guest asked, interrupting their heated exchange. Ethan turned, forcing a smile, his arm wrapping around Clara's waist, pulling her close. That was just my angry talk, Ethan said, his voice smooth and charming. I've apologized to my wife and got her forgiveness. Mrs. Blackwood, is it true? The guest asked, turning to Clara. His eyes filled with curiosity. Clara hesitated, her eyes meeting Ethan's, a silent plea passing between them. Clara murmured, forcing a smile, her voice strained. We love each other deeply. Let's go, Clara, Ethan said, his voice urgent, pulling her towards the dance floor. Let's toast to your father, Ethan said, his voice strained. Let's share with him our joy of making up. Ethan raised his glass, his eyes fixed on Mr. Shaw's, a forced smile plastered on his face. Here, enjoy the food, everyone, Ethan announced, his voice strained and unnatural. Here, enjoy. Nathan approached Mr. Shaw's, his expression grave. Mr. Shaw's, it's such a happy day, Nathan said, his voice low. I'm toasting to you, Mr. Shaw's. Nathan raised his glass, his eyes meeting Mr. Shaw's, a silent message passing between them. Ethan, Mr. Shaw said, turning to Ethan, his voice cold and hard. If you really care about the baby, treat Clara nicely. Ethan forced a smile, nodding curtly. I will, Mr. Shaw's. Baby, Mr. Shaw's repeated, his voice softening slightly, his gaze shifting to Clara, a hint of tenderness in his eyes. I hope what he says is true, Clara. Dad? Clara asked, her voice laced with concern, seeing her father sway slightly, his face paling. Dad? Mr. Shaw's clutched his chest, his breath catching in his throat, his eyes widening in pain. Dad! Dad! Clara cried, her voice filled with terror, rushing to her father's side as he collapsed. Dad! 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 News reports flashed across television screens. Release a statement, a news anchor announced. The chairman of Shaw's Group died of a heart attack, leaving a will that says Ethan Blackwood will be the acting chairman. Ethan stood over Mr. Shaw's lifeless body, his face a mask of triumph. Okay, Neil, Ethan said, his voice cold and hard. Heart attack! It was you, Ethan! Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury, her eyes blazing with hatred. Something was wrong with the wine. Ethan ignored her accusations, his eyes fixed on Mr. Shaw's, a cold satisfaction in his gaze. I'm already so obedient to you, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. Why did you do that, Ethan? Clara sobbed, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. Ethan's smile widened, a hint of malice in his eyes. Obedient? He repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. As long as he's dead, Clara, Ethan said, his voice cold and hard. You'll never be able to escape my grasp. You murdered my father, Ethan, Clara shrieked, her voice shaking with rage. Aren't you afraid you'd go to jail? Ethan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. Don't talk nonsense, Clara, he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. Your father died of a heart attack. Nothing to do with me. Ethan, you're an animal, Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury, tears streaming down her face. You know clearly Clara has got a brain tumor. She can't take any trauma, Ethan. Doctor! Mr. Shaw stirred slightly, a faint groan escaping his lips. Dad! Dad! Clara cried, relief flooding through her, rushing to her father's side. Dad, you're so resilient. Still breathing. Ethan's face contorted with rage, his eyes flashing with fury. Ethan, you murderer! Clara shrieked, her voice shaking with hatred. I will haunt you even in death, Ethan. Ethan ignored her outburst, his eyes fixed on Mr. Shaw's, a cold calculation in his gaze. You'd better hurry up, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. As long as you snuff it, Clara, I'll succeed to Shaw's group. Ethan, I'll live my life well, Ethan, Clara vowed, her voice trembling but resolute. I'll make you pay for what you did to my father, Ethan. Nathan rushed to Clara's side, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. Clara, calm down, Nathan urged, his voice soothing. Your health matters, Clara. Nathan turned to Ethan, his eyes flashing with anger. Ethan! Kick him out! Nathan roared, his voice shaking with fury. I don't want to see him, Ethan sneered, pulling out a document from his briefcase. Sign it, Clara, Ethan demanded, thrusting the papers at her. And I'll promise that I'll never show up to you. Nathan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. You're making Clara voluntarily relinquish her inheritance? Ethan? Nathan challenged, his voice laced with anger. Right to Shaw's group, Ethan? You're backing her into the corner, aren't you? Nathan turned to Clara, his voice softening, a hint of tenderness in his tone. Ready us to take her in, Nathan? Ethan scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. Nathan ignored Ethan, his eyes fixed on Clara, a silent plea in his gaze. Clara, I'll sign it, Clara said softly, her voice weary. You can't sign it, Clara, Nathan protested, his voice urgent. Shaw's group is your dad's baby, Clara. As long as he divorces me, Nathan, Clara said, her voice resolute. I'm willing to pay any price. I've never thought marrying a man who doesn't love me will cost me everything. Clara, don't worry, Nathan said, his voice firm, his eyes meeting hers. I won't let him succeed. When we colluded, Ethan, Nathan said, turning back to Ethan, his voice cold and hard. You didn't say you'd take Shaw's group away. You didn't tell me Clara has brain cancer either. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. If I had told you, Nathan, Ethan stammered, his voice trembling, you wouldn't do that? Nathan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. Aren't you afraid such a big blow will take her life, Ethan? Nathan challenged, his voice laced with sarcasm. Ethan's face contorted with rage, his eyes flashing with fury. Are you worried about her, Nathan? Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Have you fallen for her, Nathan? Nathan remained silent, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. I would even care for a pet that I raised, Ethan, Nathan said finally, his voice cold and hard. And it's good for you, Ethan, Nathan continued, his voice dripping with venom. She's given up on you and will never bother you. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, his fists clenching. You're really calculating, Nathan, Ethan sneered, his voice laced with contempt. Don't forget to get a divorce, Ethan, Nathan warned, his voice low and menacing. Or I'll send the video of you buying the waiter to poison Chester Shaw's to the cops. Ethan froze again, his face paling, horror gripping his heart. You filmed a video, Nathan? Ethan stammered, his voice barely audible. Why didn't I... Nathan chuckled softly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Ethan, you're much sillier than I thought. Don't worry, Ethan, Nathan continued, his voice cold and dismissive. I have no feelings for that dissolute woman. I've long wanted a divorce, Ethan. Ethan's phone buzzed, Neil's name flashing on the screen. Mr. Blackwood, I've got it all settled with that dead guy, Neil reported, his voice low and urgent. Ethan's eyes widened, a cold satisfaction settling in his heart. Where are you going now, Clara? Ethan asked, his voice softening slightly, though a hint of menace remained. You must lie down in bed, Clara. I want to see my dad, Ethan, Clara pleaded, her voice weak, tears welling up in her eyes. Don't go, Clara, Ethan said, his voice firm, blocking her path. Your dad's body has been cremated. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat, horror gripping her heart. It was Ethan's work too, Clara, Nathan explained softly, his voice laced with sympathy. Yes, Clara, Ethan confirmed, his voice cold and hard. It was cremated instantly, and he took the ashes. I've tried many ways, Clara, but couldn't get it. He's specially done it for fear that I won't divorce him. Clara? I'll find a way to get the ashes. Clara, Nathan promised, his voice resolute. You may have a rest here, Clara. I have to do something, Clara, or I'll break down. Nathan turned to leave, pausing at the door, his eyes meeting Clara's, a silent promise passing between them. You must get treated now, Clara, Nathan urged, his voice gentle. I've arranged for a medical team. They'll cure you. Clara shook her head slowly, her eyes downcast. How long can I live without the treatment, Nathan? She asked, her voice barely audible. A year, Clara, Nathan replied, his voice low and grave. That's enough, Nathan, Clara whispered, a sad smile gracing her lips. Enough for me to deliver the baby. Nathan's eyes widened in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. Do you still love Ethan, Clara? Nathan asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Love, Nathan, Clara repeated, her laugh bitter and hollow. I want his life, Nathan. Then why do you want the baby, Clara? Nathan asked, his voice softer now, concern etched on his face. Clara's hand rested protectively on her stomach, her eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. The child is innocent, Nathan, she said softly. It's Ethan's child. Do you want to be entangled with him all your life, Clara? Nathan asked, his voice laced with concern. You should consider it, Clara. Nathan took Clara's arm, helping her out of bed. I'll walk you back to the ward, Clara, he said gently, his voice soothing. Seeing you've just taken over Shaw's group and not stable, Clara, Nathan observed, his voice shifting back to business. Nathan Lowe poached some core leaders. Clara sighed, shaking her head, her voice wary. He's always sinister, Nathan. Now that's predictable, Clara, Nathan said, his voice cold and hard. But if this goes on, Shaw's group will go bankrupt. Since the leaders left so easily, Nathan, Clara retorted, her voice gaining strength. They're not so impotent after all. We don't need them. Nathan smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. You're right, Clara. He paused, his expression turning serious. Aren't you going to explain to Claire about her father, Nathan? Leah asked, her voice laced with concern. Ethan shook his head, his eyes downcast. There is no need, Leah, Ethan said, his voice low. The urgent task now is to save her life. I hear Nathan Lowe has hired a top medical team, Leah observed, her voice thoughtful. It's likely Clara can be healed. He's an old jerk, Leah scoffed, rolling her eyes. That jerk does have his ways of pursuing women. He doesn't love Clara at all, Leah, Ethan said, his voice hard. Back then, Chester Shaw's looked down on him. Nathan Lowe did this for revenge. If this isn't love, Ethan, Leah challenged, her voice laced with sarcasm. Shut up. She paused, her expression turning grave. By the way, Ethan, Clara can't keep the baby to treat her tumor. Ethan froze, his blood running cold, horror gripping his heart. Clara, that's easy to choose, Leah said, her voice cold and hard. She must live first. Clara says she'll deliver the baby, Leah, Ethan said, his voice barely audible. Leah sighed, shaking her head, her voice weary. I found the video of Ethan buying the waiter to poison your father, Clara, Leah said, her voice low and urgent. Father Leah, Ethan corrected, his voice strained. I've sent it to you, Leah. Mr. Shaw's watched the video, his face pale, his eyes filled with horror and disbelief. Okay, Leah, Mr. Shaw said finally, his voice shaking with anger. After watching it, you'll understand you can't deliver that jerk's kid, Clara. Clara took her phone from her father, her eyes fixed on the screen, her expression unreadable. Okay, Dad, Clara murmured, her voice barely audible. I'll think it through. Mr. Shaw sighed, shaking his head, his voice weary. After watching it, Clara, Mr. Shaw said, his voice firm but gentle. Give back my phone, silly woman. Ethan stormed into Leah's office, his face a mask of fury. The so-called proof given by Nathan Lowe is fake, Leah, Ethan roared, his voice shaking with rage. You're the one messing with me, Leah, Ethan accused, his voice laced with suspicion. You murdered my dad, Ethan, Leah retorted, her voice cold and hard, and took Shaw's group away. I did nothing to your dad, Ethan. Ethan protested, his voice strained. Right, Ethan? Leah scoffed, rolling her eyes. It wasn't you, Ethan. It's my fault. I was a fool to love you and insisted on marrying you. Or this wouldn't happen. Ethan's expression softened slightly, a flicker of regret in his eyes. You know nothing, Leah, Ethan said, his voice low and weary. Can you calm down, Leah? What else do I have to know, Ethan? Leah challenged, her voice laced with sarcasm. You did all these right before me. Do you believe Nathan Lowe so much, Leah? Ethan asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Yes, Ethan, Leah replied, her voice firm and resolute. He's 1,000 times better than you. Ethan turned away, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. There are things that I can't tell you, Leah, Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. You'll find it out. Stop acting, Leah, Ethan snapped, his voice hardening again. You're just afraid the proof will get you in jail. Ethan instructed his security guard. Someone watch Clara closely. Ethan burst into Clara's room, his face a mask of fury. What do you want, Ethan? Clara asked, her voice weary, her eyes devoid of emotion. Ethan ignored her question, his voice cold and hard. You can't keep the baby, Clara. Clara's eyes widened in shock, her voice rising in anger. We've divorced, Ethan, Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury. The baby is unrelated to you. I'm the father of the baby, Clara, Ethan retorted, his voice cold and menacing. I'm the one who can decide whether he will be delivered. No, Ethan, Clara shrieked, her voice filled with terror. You can't do it. I've arranged doctors, Clara, Ethan said, his voice relentless. The surgery is next afternoon. Don't. The baby is important to me, Ethan. Clara pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. I beg you, please let us go. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening again. Not a chance, Clara, he snapped, his voice cold and unforgiving. Ethan, you're killing me, Clara cried, her voice shaking with despair. Keeping the baby is to kill you, silly, Ethan retorted, his voice cold and dismissive. Don't let her leave the ward without my permission, Ethan instructed his security guard, turning and striding out of the room, leaving Clara sobbing and alone. Ethan, I'll never forgive you, Clara cried, her voice echoing through the empty room. Neil approached Ethan, his expression grave. Ethan, I found out who took the video, Neil reported, his voice low. The man is hired by Nathan Lowe. He wanted to use the video to send me to jail, Neil. How naive. Ethan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. Now, should we release the proof of Nathan Lowe giving you the poison, Ethan? Neil asked, his voice hesitant. Ethan shook his head, a cunning glint in his eyes. Let him be smug for now, Neil, Ethan said, his voice low and conspiratorial. It can divert his attention. How's the voice recording now, Ethan? Ethan asked, his voice shifting back to business. According to Mr. Shaw's message, Ethan, Neil reported, I sent a mole into the Lowe house. He found that your father's former driver is now working in there. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. Keep it down and keep looking, Neil, Ethan instructed, his voice urgent. By the way, Neil, what did you find about Emily Carter? I've sent people abroad, Ethan, Neil replied. All her medical reports show that she doesn't have heart disease. In this case, her papers should all be fake. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, anger simmering beneath the surface. You mean she's been lying to me, Neil? Ethan asked, his voice laced with disbelief. In addition to that, Ethan, Neil continued, his voice low and conspiratorial, she enjoyed a comfy life abroad. What do you mean, Neil? Ethan asked, his voice hardening again. In 3 years, Ethan, Neil explained, she used up $4 million. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. That can't be true, Neil, Ethan exclaimed, his voice barely audible. She didn't have so much money when I went bust. Then she said she only had 15 grand, Ethan, Neil reminded him, his voice soft. And she gave it all to me. Ethan's eyes widened further, realization dawning in his eyes. Your mum gave Emily Carter the money, Ethan, Neil suggested, his voice hesitant. Ethan shook his head slowly, disbelief warring with dawning understanding. That's even less likely, Neil, Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. My mum didn't have so much money. Clara did it, Neil. Ethan's voice hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. Except for that, Neil, Ethan continued, his voice firming with resolve. I can't find another explanation. I see, Ethan, Neil said softly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Tomorrow. Ethan instructed, his voice cold and hard. You must make her have the surgery. Nothing can go wrong. Ethan received a frantic call from Neil. Mr. Blackwood, your wife was taken by Mr. Lowe, Neil exclaimed, his voice filled with panic. What? You losers! Ethan roared, his voice shaking with rage. Get her back now. Clara found Nathan waiting for her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. Thank you for saving me, Nathan, Clara said softly, her eyes meeting his. gratitude shining through. Nathan chuckled softly, waving away her thanks. "Though I saved you, Clara," Nathan said, his voice shifting, becoming more serious. "I agree with Ethan's opinion. You can't keep the baby, Clara." Clara's smile faltered, her eyes clouding with sadness. "You know me, Nathan," Clara said, her voice low and resolute. "Since I made the decision, no one can stop me." Nathan sighed, shaking his head, his voice laced with concern. "Do you love him so much for his child, Clara?" Nathan asked, his voice barely audible. "For his child, Clara," Nathan repeated, his voice softening, a hint of tenderness entering his tone. "You'd even risk your life?" Clara shook her head slowly, her eyes downcast. "I no longer love him, Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But this child is my only hope in the world, Nathan. I must give birth to him." Nathan's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Since you don't love him, Clara," Nathan said, his voice firm, "you shouldn't give birth to the child." "Give Clara back, Neil," Nathan instructed, his voice cold and hard. "And she likes me, Neil," Nathan continued, his voice laced with arrogance. "And she's with me." "You can't control that, Ethan," Nathan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "It's no time to argue, Ethan," Neil interjected, his voice urgent. She must have the surgery now, Ethan, or she can't live." "Now, you worry about her, Nathan?" Ethan scoffed, his voice laced with sarcasm. "But you're no longer qualified to decide it, Nathan." Nathan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Do you think she'll listen to you, Ethan?" Nathan challenged, his voice laced with disbelief. "Since I'm always the bad guy, Nathan," Ethan retorted, his voice cold and hard. "Only I can make it happen." "Okay, Ethan," Nathan conceded, his voice grudging. "I can take her to the hospital. But after the surgery, Ethan," Nathan warned, his voice low and menacing, "I'll take her away." Ethan turned to Clara, his eyes meeting hers, a silent plea passing between them. "Clara, what did you hear?" Ethan asked, his voice softening slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I trust you so much, Ethan," she sobbed, her voice shaking with despair. "I don't understand why you colluded with Blake." Nathan stepped forward, his voice calm and reassuring. "Clara, he has something on me," Nathan explained, his voice low and conspiratorial, "and threatens me to obey. I want to give birth to my kid before I pass away," Clara said, her voice barely audible, her eyes filled with despair. "Why are you all against it?" "Whether you treat your tumor or not, Clara," Nathan said, his voice cold and hard. "The baby can't make it." "Got it." Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "You're lying, Nathan," Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury. "My baby is innocent." "The tumor has got you, Clara," Nathan said, his voice cold and dismissive. "Your brain must be muddled now." "What else have you kept from me, Nathan?" Clara challenged, her voice laced with suspicion. Nathan sighed, shaking his head, his voice weary. "I just said nonsense, Clara," Nathan said, his voice gentle. "Listen to me, Clara," Nathan urged, his voice firm but kind. "You must have a surgery tomorrow. Come with me." Clara shook her head slowly, her eyes downcast, her voice barely audible. "We've been married for 3 years, Nathan," Clara said, her voice soft. "Can you let me choose for myself once?" Ethan appeared suddenly, his face a mask of fury, his eyes flashing with rage. "Clara!" Ethan roared, his voice shaking with anger. "I'm a human being, Ethan," Clara cried, her voice trembling with fear. "If you want me dead, Ethan," Clara pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face, "you can finish me right now. Just don't torture me endlessly." Ethan hesitated, his anger faltering slightly as he saw her distress. "Okay, Clara," Ethan said finally, his voice less harsh. "Your dad is still alive, Clara." Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning hope. "You're just giving me hope before destroying it, right, Ethan?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, fear creeping back into her heart. "I won't believe any word you say, Ethan." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair, his expression softening slightly. "It was my fault, Clara," Ethan confessed, his voice low and sincere. "I didn't know you were so badly ill, Clara." Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching out hesitantly, gently cupping her face. "Ethan, please let me go this once," Clara pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. "I won't blame you for my father's death, Ethan. The past is the past, but I have to give birth to the child." Ethan instructed Neil. "Hank, do whatever you can to make both Clara and the child live." Emily confronted Nathan, her face contorted with rage. "Did you tell Ethan what I did abroad, Nathan?" Emily shrieked, her voice shrill. "He froze my bank account and kicked me out of Blackwood Air." Nathan scoffed, rolling his eyes, his expression dismissive. "That has nothing to do with me, Emily," Nathan retorted, his voice cold and hard. "And I don't care about it." "You got me so much trouble, Nathan," Emily cried, her voice rising in panic. "Don't even think about staying out of it, Nathan." "I heard that you're pregnant with Ethan's baby, Emily," Nathan said, his voice low and menacing. Emily froze, her eyes widening in shock, horror gripping her heart. "I'm not, Nathan," Emily stammered, her voice trembling, fear creeping into her voice. "Don't deny it, Emily," Nathan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You can't cheat me with your clumsy act." "What will you do, Nathan?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible, terror gripping her heart. Nathan's smile widened, a hint of malice in his eyes. "I won't give you the chance to use the baby to get to Ethan, Emily." "Are you all right, Clara?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle, concern etched on his face. "You're finally awake." Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. "Ethan, where is my baby?" Clara asked, her voice weak, tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan ignored her question, his eyes fixed on Nathan, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "Neil did all he could, Clara," Ethan said finally, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The baby is gone." Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "I don't believe you, Ethan," Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury. "How is it possible?" Nathan stepped forward, his arm wrapping protectively around Clara's shoulders, his voice soothing. "Calm down, Clara." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening, anger flaring again. "Ethan, I beg you, please give my baby back," Clara pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. Ethan ignored her pleas, his gaze fixed on Nathan, his voice cold and hard. "Maybe it's all meant to be, Clara," Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's good for you that the baby's gone. Clara's eyes widen in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "Why do you think I can't protect him, Ethan?" Clara cried, her voice shaking with fury. "Why do you take him away from me? Why don't you believe me, Ethan? Ethan, I hate you!" Clara shrieked, her voice filled with hatred, tears streaming down her face. Ethan remained silent, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "You can hate me, Clara," Ethan said finally, his voice low and weary. "But you must live." "Ethan, I didn't mean it," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible, tears streaming down her face. "Shut up, Clara!" Ethan snapped, his voice harsh, cutting off her words. "You smeared Clara and slept around, Ethan," Neil said, his voice cold and hard, stepping forward, standing beside Clara. "I gave you a chance, Ethan, but you haven't changed a bit. I've got full proofs of Emily Carter is harming Clara," Neil continued, his voice firm and resolute. "Need I send them to the cops, Ethan?" Ethan hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Do it now, Neil," Ethan said finally, his voice low and weary. "I don't want to see her again." "No, Neil," Ethan corrected, his voice trembling, fear creeping into his voice. "It wasn't me, Neil. Nathan Lowe did it. He set me up abroad and took away all my money. He forced me to do it." "Nathan Lowe, right?" Ethan repeated, his voice barely audible, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "He forced me to do it, Neil. I'll make him pay for that, Neil. As for you, Emily Carter," Ethan said, his voice hardening again, his eyes flashing with anger, "you may get in jail first." Emily sobbed, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan will have me jailed, Nathan Lowe," Emily pleaded, her voice filled with terror. "You must help me, Nathan Lowe." Nathan scoffed, rolling his eyes, his expression dismissive. "You're of no use, Emily Carter," Nathan retorted, his voice cold and hard. "Saving you is a waste of time. If you don't help me, Nathan Lowe," Emily threatened, her voice rising in panic, "I'll tell Clara the truth." Nathan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening, anger flaring again. "How dare you threaten me, Emily Carter?" Nathan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "If you dare say it, Emily Carter," Nathan warned, his voice low and menacing, "I'll make you shut up forever." Clara found Ethan waiting for her, his expression softer, a hint of remorse in his eyes. "Clara, I've sent Emily Carter into jail," Ethan said softly, his voice low and sincere. "Can you forgive me, Clara?" Clara met his gaze, her eyes searching his, a flicker of hope flickering in her heart. "I can trust you this time, Ethan," Clara said finally, her voice hesitant, a hint of hope creeping into her voice. "Will you help me send Ethan Blackwood to jail too?" Ethan's expression hardened, his eyes turning cold again. "I'll do that even if you don't say it, Clara," Ethan said, his voice firm and resolute. "My baby, Clara," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, pain etched on his face. "I'll let him make it up to you. He doesn't owe me, Clara, but he owes you too much." "Clara, it's not safe here," Nathan said, his voice low and urgent, interrupting their moment. "After I get it settled, Clara," Nathan continued, his voice soothing, "I'll have you transferred." Ethan stepped forward, blocking Nathan's path, his eyes flashing with anger. "You can't take her away, Nathan Lowe," Ethan roared, his voice shaking with fury. Nathan scoffed, rolling his eyes, his expression dismissive. "You can't stop me, Ethan," Nathan retorted, his voice cold and hard. "She has divorced you, Ethan. She can decide where she will go." "Shut up, Nathan Lowe," Ethan snapped, his voice harsh, cutting off his words. "I haven't made you pay for buying off Emily Carter yet, Nathan Lowe." Ethan turned to Clara, his voice softening slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. "Nathan Lowe, you know Emily Carter?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Don't believe him, Clara," Nathan cried, his voice urgent, stepping forward, standing beside Clara, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. "Ethan, how dare you smear me, Ethan!" Nathan roared, his voice shaking with fury. "Clara, I'll take you to a place," Nathan said, turning to Clara, his voice gentle. "Then you'll believe me." Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering between Ethan and Nathan, confusion clouding her gaze. "Okay, Nathan?" Clara said finally, her voice barely audible, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can trust you, Nathan. If you give my dad and baby back to me, Nathan," Clara continued, her voice trembling, tears welling up in her eyes, "I'll believe whatever you say." Ethan watched Clara and Nathan leave, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "You can take her away after she has the surgery, Ethan," Neil said, his voice low and grave, interrupting his thoughts. "Once the tumor cells spread, Ethan," Neil explained, "that would be a hopeless case for her surgery." "Surgery," Ethan repeated, his voice barely audible, shock rippling through him. "I found the best doctors, Ethan," Neil reassured him, his voice gentle. "You needn't worry, Ethan. Hank is the best brain surgeon in the country. Only he can do it best." Ethan remained silent, his gaze fixed on the empty doorway, his mind racing. "No need, Neil," Ethan said finally, his voice low and weary. "In these 3 years, Neil," Ethan continued, his voice softening slightly, a hint of sadness in his tone, "I've been preparing to marry her. You can't imagine how much I've done for her." Neil nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I know you're buying Blackwood Air's shares, Ethan," Neil said, his voice low. "If you agree to my plan, Ethan," Neil continued, his voice conspiratorial, "I'll give you 30% of the shares." Ethan scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. "30% is not enough, Neil," Ethan retorted, his voice dripping with contempt. "If you give me Blackwood Air and assets of Shaw's Group, Neil," Ethan continued, his voice cold and hard, "I'll agree." Neil hesitated, his eyes searching Ethan's, a hint of doubt in his gaze. "I know you won't," Neil said finally, his voice low and weary. "After all, Ethan," Neil continued, his voice laced with sarcasm, "in your mind, benefits matter most." Ethan's smile widened, a hint of triumph in his eyes. "Deal," Ethan said, his voice firm and resolute. "You'd better do as you say, Neil," Ethan warned, his voice low and menacing. "Remember to take all the files to me as soon as you can." Nathan Lowe watched Ethan leave, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Ethan, you stupid ass," Nathan muttered, his voice laced with contempt. "Without the money, Ethan, you'll lose everything. Then Clara will be mine." Nathan visited Clara in the hospital, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "I've arranged for a doctor, Clara," Nathan said, his voice soothing. "You can go through the surgery tomorrow." "No need, Nathan," Clara said softly, her voice weary. "I'll just make it to the day when Ethan Blackwood's jailed." Nathan's smile faltered, his expression turning grave. "In fact, Clara," Nathan said, his voice hesitant. Your cancer is at an early stage. Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning hope. What? Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. I made it up, Clara, Nathan confessed, his voice low and sincere, to make you take the surgery early. I'm sorry, Clara. Clara stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes, a mix of relief and anger warring within her. So, I can be cured, Nathan? Clara asked, her voice trembling, hope flickering in her heart. Nathan nodded, smiling warmly. Yes, Clara. It's not easy to deal with Ethan Blackwood. After you have the surgery, Clara, Nathan continued, his voice firming with resolve. We'll deal with him together. Okay, Nathan, Clara murmured, a small smile gracing her lips. Miss Shaw's, you needn't worry, the doctor reassured her, his voice gentle. I'll cure you. Clara smiled back, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thanks, Doctor, she said softly. I won't blame you even if you fail, Doctor. You must have faith, Miss Shaw's, the doctor said, his voice encouraging, so that the surgery can succeed. Clara hesitated, her smile faltering, a shadow passing over her face. I have no reason to be faithful, Doctor, she said, her voice barely audible, despair creeping into her voice. The doctor paused, his expression thoughtful, his eyes meeting hers. Miss Shaw's, hatred is a kind of faith, too. Clara looked up at him, a flicker of understanding dawning in her eyes. Thank you, Doctor, Clara said softly, a small smile gracing her lips. You're right. Ethan paced restlessly outside the operating room, Neil standing beside him, his expression grave. How is she? Ethan asked, his voice barely audible, his anxiety palpable. Neil sighed, shaking his head, his voice weary. The surgery went well, Ethan, Neil reported, his voice low. She's doing fine. Ethan's breath hitched, relief washing over him, his body relaxing slightly. That's good, Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible, a hint of emotion creeping into his tone. She needs a calm environment for recovery, Ethan, Neil continued, his voice serious. So make sure she doesn't experience any emotional upheaval. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the operating room doors, his mind racing. I understand, Neil. I'll be leaving soon, Ethan, Neil said, his voice low. Are you really willing to leave her in Nathan Lowe's care, Ethan? Neil asked, his voice laced with concern. Ethan hesitated, his eyes downcast, his expression conflicted. I've lost everything now, Neil, Ethan said finally, his voice weary. Nathan Lowe can be quite cunning, Neil observed, his voice thoughtful. But he'll take good care of her. Ethan nodded again, his gaze still fixed on the doors. I hope so, Neil. I'll stay at the hospital for now, Ethan, Neil said, his voice reassuring. And update you with any news immediately. Ethan turned to Neil, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Neil, Ethan said softly, his voice barely audible. Neil smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. These words, Ethan, Neil said, his voice low. I've dealt with you for half my life, Ethan, and it's the first time I'm hearing them. Ethan turned away, unable to meet Neil's gaze, shame burning in his chest. Why are you still here, Ethan? Neil asked, his voice laced with concern. No need to worry, Neil, Ethan replied, his voice dismissive. I'm about to leave. Neil sighed, shaking his head, his voice weary. You never should have come, Ethan, Neil said, his voice low and grave. The securities at this hospital are useless, right, Ethan? Neil scoffed, rolling his eyes. For allowing a pauper like you to sneak in. Ethan turned back to face Neil, his eyes meeting his, a hint of desperation in his gaze. Yes, Neil, Ethan confessed, his voice barely audible, shame burning in his chest. I'm a pauper who has nothing left. Ethan's voice softened, a hint of tenderness creeping in. Please take good care of her, Neil, Ethan pleaded, his voice barely audible. Neil raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Who do you think you are to dictate to me, Ethan? Neil retorted, his voice laced with sarcasm. Get lost, Ethan. Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Neil watching him go, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Ethan paused outside the hospital doors, looking back at the building, a wave of realization washing over him. It's only now that I realize you're the most important part of my life, Clara, Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, tears welling up in his eyes. Ethan returned to Neil, his expression resolute, his eyes filled with determination. If you can't let go, Ethan, Neil said, his voice firm, why not? Win her back. Ethan hesitated, his gaze downcast, his expression conflicted. It's not the right time yet, Neil, Ethan said finally, his voice weary. But if you don't act soon, Ethan, Neil warned, his voice low and urgent. Nathan Lowe will secretly transfer Blackwood Air and Shaw's Group's assets abroad. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes widening in alarm. I thought I'd have to wait longer, Neil, Ethan said, his voice firming with resolve. But he's too impatient. Clara is recovering quickly, Neil, Ethan observed, his voice thoughtful. Perhaps Nathan Lowe is worried about unexpected developments and wants to take her abroad sooner. Got it, Ethan, Neil said, nodding curtly. I'll go find her. Neil left, heading back into the hospital, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts, his mind racing, a plan forming. Ethan met with Leah, his expression grave. Connor, how is the investigation going? Ethan asked, his voice urgent. Why did Nathan Lowe gain control over Blackwood Air and all of Shaw's assets? Leah sighed, shaking her head, her voice weary. The specific reasons are unclear, Ethan, Leah reported, her voice low. But Nathan Lowe has a property transfer authorization signed personally by Ethan. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. Property transfer? Why would Ethan do such a thing? Ethan repeated, his voice barely audible. He traded his soul for getting it all, Ethan, Leah said, her voice cold and hard. I will continue to investigate, Ethan. It's all Nathan Lowe's scheme, Ethan, Leah continued, her voice firming with resolve. Don't be fooled by him. Ethan stormed into Clara's room, finding her sitting up in bed, Nathan beside her, holding her hand. What right do you have to accuse others, Ethan? Nathan challenged, his voice cold and hard, stepping forward, interposing himself between Ethan and Clara. Ethan ignored Nathan, his eyes fixed on Clara, his voice softening slightly, a hint of sincerity in his tone. I can't explain everything to you right now, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. But I wasn't the one who murdered your dad. Clara scoffed, rolling her eyes, her expression dismissive. You think I'd believe you again, Ethan? Clara retorted, her voice laced with sarcasm. I'm not here to argue with you, Clara, Ethan said, his voice weary, his gaze softening as he looked at her. No, Clara, Ethan corrected, his voice gentler still. I'm also too tired to argue. 3 years of quarrels have me worn out. Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching out hesitantly, gently cupping her face. "I'm taking you to see someone, Clara," Ethan said, his voice low and sincere. "After that, Clara," Ethan continued, his voice firming with resolve, "you can do whatever you want with me." Ethan led Clara to a private room in the hospital, opening the door, revealing Mr. Shaws sitting in a chair, looking pale but alive. "Dad!" Clara cried, relief flooding through her, rushing to her father's side. "Nora, Dad, things have taken a turn," Ethan explained, his voice low and urgent. "So I had to bring her to see you. I'll step out for now." Ethan left the room, leaving Clara and her father alone. "What exactly is going on, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice laced with confusion, her eyes searching her father's. Mr. Shaws sighed, shaking his head, his voice weary. "This plan involves the Blackwoods, the Lows, and the Shaws," Mr. Shaws explained, his voice low and grave. "It involves grudges over a decade ago. The Low family, Clara," Mr. Shaws continued, his voice barely audible. "You mean Nathan Low?" Clara's eyes widened in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "Why would you hide something this big from me, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, fear creeping into her voice. "Since you've come here, Clara," Mr. Shaws said, his voice firm but gentle, "let me tell you everything." "Go ahead, Dad." "What collaboration, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "Nathan Low wanted me to poison you at the party, Clara," Mr. Shaws confessed, his voice low and conspiratorial. "And I agreed." Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "What is your plan, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice barely audible, terror gripping her heart. "Nathan Low is too arrogant, Clara," Mr. Shaws explained, his voice cold and hard. "Once you disappear, Clara," Mr. Shaws continued, his voice low and conspiratorial, "he'll lower his guard, then reveal his true intentions." "All right, Dad." Clara hesitated, her eyes searching her father's, a hint of doubt in her gaze. "Aren't you afraid I'll truly end you, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, fear creeping into her voice. Mr. Shaws smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "Between you and Nathan Low, Clara," Mr. Shaws said, his voice firm but kind, "I'm more willing to trust you." Clara's eyes softened, tears welling up in her eyes, relief washing over her. "So, your poisoning at the banquet was fake, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice barely audible, hope flickering in her heart. "Yes, Clara," Mr. Shaws confirmed, his voice gentle, his smile widening. "It was." "Don't let Nathan Low know that I'm still alive, Clara. Is there anything I can do to help now, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice firming with resolve. "You don't need to worry about me, Clara," Mr. Shaws reassured her, his voice gentle. "Ethan and I are investigating. You only need to take good care of yourself, Clara." Mr. Shaws reached out, taking Clara's hand, his eyes meeting hers, a silent plea passing between them. "Clara, could you trust me a bit more now?" Clara nodded slowly, a small smile gracing her lips, tears streaming down her face. "My dad is alive, Ethan," Clara said softly, her voice filled with relief. "But the hurt you caused me won't simply vanish." Ethan sighed, his expression softening, a hint of remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Clara," Ethan murmured, his voice low and sincere. "And over these 3 years, Clara," Ethan continued, his voice weary, "if you had ever listened to me, we wouldn't be where we are now." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes downcast, her voice barely audible. I know I was wrong, Ethan confessed, his voice low and sincere. Can't you give us another chance, Clara? Clara shook her head gently, her eyes meeting his, a hint of sadness in her gaze. There's no turning back for us, Ethan, Clara said softly, her voice firm but kind. Even if my dad's alive, Ethan, Clara continued, her voice breaking, tears welling up in her eyes. What about my child? Ethan's face contorted with pain, his eyes filling with tears. If it weren't for Emily Carter... Clara, Ethan said, his voice shaking with emotion. How could I have lost my child? The child's loss was an accident, Clara, Ethan explained, his voice low and sincere. At that time, Clara, Ethan continued, his voice trembling, I had arranged a surgery to save you and the baby. Clara scoffed, rolling her eyes, her expression dismissive. Stop making excuses, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice laced with sarcasm. It's sickening to hear. Ethan sighed again, his expression hardening, his eyes turning cold. I'm sorry, Clara, Ethan murmured, his voice weary. I must return to Nathan Lowe's side, Ethan, Clara said, her voice firming with resolve. It's the only way to gather evidence of his crimes. Clara turned to leave, Ethan watching her go, his heart aching with a mix of pain and longing. The surveillance showed that Ethan took you away, Clara, Mr. Shaw said, his voice laced with suspicion. Did he do anything to you, Clara? Clara shook her head, her eyes downcast. No, Dad, Clara replied softly. He didn't. Where did you two go, Clara? Mr. Shaws asked, his voice still laced with suspicion. He wanted to reconcile with me, Dad, Clara explained, her voice hesitant. But I refused. Mr. Shaw smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. That's good, Clara, Mr. Shaw said, his voice warm. Clara, I've lived my life with a clear conscience, Clara, Mr. Shaws continued, his voice thick with emotion. My only regret is not stopping you from marrying Ethan Blackwood 3 years ago. Mr. Shaws paused, his expression turning serious, his eyes meeting Clara's, a silent plea passing between them. I've waited too long for this moment, Clara, Mr. Shaws said, his voice low and sincere. Clara, will you marry me? Okay, Dad, Clara murmured, a small smile gracing her lips, tears streaming down her face, relief washing over her. I never would have thought that you were actually the one who wanted to kill my dad, Nathan, Clara said, her voice cold and hard, confronting Nathan Lowe. Nathan chuckled softly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. I heard you accepted Nathan Lowe's proposal, Clara, Ethan said, his voice laced with sarcasm, appearing suddenly, his face a mask of fury. We've divorced, Ethan, Clara retorted, her voice cold and dismissive. This is my personal matter, Ethan, and you have no right to interfere. Ethan scoffed, rolling his eyes, his expression dismissive. I thought your father had told you the whole story, Clara, Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You know he is no good, Clara, yet you jumped into the fire. Yes, Ethan, Clara replied, her voice firm and resolute. Regardless of who he is, Ethan, he's good to me and won't hurt me. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, anger simmering beneath the surface. You already hate me so much, Clara, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. You've held on for so long. Are you truly planning to give up, Clara? Clara smiled, a sad, weary smile. I should say I gave up a long time ago, Ethan. Go, Clara, Ethan said, his voice softening slightly, a hint of sadness in his tone. You don't have to leave this apartment, Clara, Ethan continued, his voice low and sincere. This apartment was the Shaws family's property, Clara, and I've taken it back. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes downcast, her voice barely audible. Are you going to ruin me, Ethan? Clara asked, her voice trembling, fear creeping into her voice. Yes, Clara, Ethan confirmed, his voice cold and hard. As the chairman of Shaw's group, Clara, Ethan continued, his voice firm and resolute. I'm formally notifying you that from now on you are not allowed to enter this villa. Nathan Lowe, you will face retribution now. Everything is mine. Get out, Clara. Nathan approached Clara, his expression warm and inviting. Clara, I will give you the very best this world could offer, Clara, Nathan promised, his voice gentle. In 3 days, Clara, Nathan continued, his voice low and sincere. You will be my most beautiful and happiest bride. The wedding's in 3 days, Clara, Nathan said, his voice firm and resolute. You are unwilling to... No, Clara interrupted, shaking her head, a small smile gracing her lips. It's just that you didn't discuss this with me, Nathan, Clara explained, her voice soft. I can't wait any longer, Clara, Nathan said, his voice urgent. I've waited too long for this day. Nathan Lowe has told the public in 3 days he will marry Clara, Leah reported, her voice grave. Clara might have her own thoughts. How's your preparation going, Ethan? Ethan smiled, a cunning glint in his eyes. I've sent the video of Nathan Lowe giving me poison to the media, Leah, Ethan said, his voice low and conspiratorial. I'll unmask him at the wedding. Leah nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. That alone isn't enough to bring him down, Ethan, Leah observed, her voice serious. The evidence of him illegally selling off Blackwood Air and the Shaws Group's assets is also within my grasp, Leah, Ethan said, his voice firming with resolve. The chain of evidence is strong. Leah smiled, admiration shining in her eyes. Then that's the spirit, Ethan, Leah said, her voice encouraging. I'm glad to hear that. Nathan Lowe is too impatient. Ethan, Leah continued, her voice low and conspiratorial. He thinks he's got it all under control, but actually it's not. With evil intentions, Ethan, Leah warned, his voice grave. He'll reap what he sows. I hope you will attend the wedding with me, Ethan, Leah asked, her voice hesitant. Your presence will be the final straw to break the camel's back. Ethan smiled, a hint of triumph in his eyes. All right, Leah, Ethan agreed, his voice firm. Let's proceed with your plan. But remember, Leah, Ethan warned, his voice low and menacing. Ensuring Clara's safety is my bottom line. Leah nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Don't worry, Ethan, Leah reassured him, her voice gentle. I won't let anyone harm Clara. Mr. Shaws approached Clara, a serious expression on his face. Clara. I'm sorry, Miss Shaws, Mr. Shaws said, his voice low and grave. This is Emily Carter's lawsuit. What's going on, Dad? Clara asked, her voice laced with confusion, her eyes searching her father's. Mr. Sanford appeared, his expression gentle, his eyes meeting Clara's. Mr. Sanford, you saved me, Clara said, her voice soft, gratitude shining through. And I trust you. I hope you can be honest with me. Mr. Sanford nodded slowly, his expression grave. Actually, Clara, Mr. Sanford confessed, his voice low and sincere. I'm not just a neurosurgeon. I've also been friends with Ethan for many years. Then, my brain tumor surgery, Mr. Sanford? Clara asked, her voice barely audible, suspicion creeping into her voice. Mr. Sanford nodded again, his smile gentle but sad. You guessed right, Clara, Mr. Sanford confirmed, his voice soft. It was arranged by Ethan, but Nathan Lowe said it was him. Ethan has done a lot for you, Clara, Mr. Sanford explained, his voice low and sincere. But he doesn't want you to know. He's atoning for his mistakes. He filed a lawsuit against Emily Carter for me, Mr. Sanford. Clara asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Emily Carter hurt your child back then, Clara, Mr. Sanford explained, his voice grave. Ethan asked me to prepare for the surgery. He wanted both of you to be safe. It's a pity. Wasn't Emily Carter sent by him to hurt the child? Clara asked, her voice trembling, fear creeping into her voice. Actually, Clara, Mr. Sanford corrected, his voice low and conspiratorial. It was Nathan Lowe who pulled the strings. He didn't want you to give birth to Ethan's child. Emily Carter and Nathan Lowe have been colluding since they returned. Clara's eyes widened in shock, realization dawning in her eyes. The real culprit behind your and Ethan's breakup is not Emily Carter, Mr. Sanford said, his voice firm and resolute. Nathan Lowe plotted everything. Clara nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes, understanding washing over her. I understand now, Mr. Sanford, Clara said softly, her voice barely audible. Thank you, Mr. Sanford. I hope what I've done can help you both, Clara, Mr. Sanford said, his voice gentle. But with such deep rifts between you, Clara, Mr. Sanford continued, his voice laced with concern. How could you bury the hatchet? Clara remained silent, her gaze downcast, her mind racing,